Happy New Year and welcome to the pack. Happy New Year, my beautiful listeners. Can you believe we are kicking off 2026 together? Whether you've been with me since the beginning or you just found at Linas Romantasy collection today, I am so happy you are here to start the year with some romance, magic, and a little bit of danger. Now, let's get right into it. Imagine this. You meet a man at a bar who is too handsome, too intense, and screams danger. You panic, run away, and give him a fake number, specifically the number for a septic tank cleaning service. You think you're smart. You think you're safe in your dorm room until 2 a.m. He doesn't call, he doesn't text, he knocks. Because he didn't need your number, he tracked your scent. And when he steps inside your tiny room, he locks the door. If you want to find out what the Alpha King does next, you know what to do. Smash that subscribe button, give this video a huge like, and share it with your best friend who needs a new book boyfriend in 2026. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you're the first to know when the next chapter drops. Question of the day: I want to know where my pack is hiding this year. Drop a comment below and tell me, where in the world are you listening from? Now, let's open that door. Chapter 1. The Septic Tank Strategy. The bass in the rusty tap was vibrating so hard I could feel it in my molars. It was one of the few places in the green zone where you couldn't hear the distant sirens from the border. In this city, you learn to ignore two things: the overpriced rent and the border skirmishes that the news politely called gang violence. We all knew better. The Outlands were a war zone. People went missing there. My mother went missing there 12 years ago, and all we got back was a closed casket and a government apology. But tonight, the only war I was fighting was against boredom. "I'm just saying, Anna," Polo Shirt Paul said, leaning in way too close. "If I hadn't traded my quarterback in week 4, I'd be a legend right now." I swirled the melting ice in my vodka tonic, praying for a sinkhole to open up. "Paul, the only legend I'm interested in is the one where I'm in my pajamas, eating leftover Thai food and not listening to this conversation." "Come on," Paul scoffed, gesturing to the TV above the bar, which was flashing a high alert warning for the West Sector. "You need a guy who can protect you. Heard they found another breached fence near the university. Those rebels are getting bold." "I have a can of pepper spray and crippling student debt, Paul. I'm pretty sure I'm terrifying enough." My roommate, Tasha, snorted into her margarita 2 stools down. She gave me a covert thumbs up. The traitor. She was the one who dragged me out here, claiming I needed to network for my art career. Apparently, networking meant listening to men with trust funds complain about sports. My phone buzzed on the sticky bar counter. I glanced down. Auntie Maureen. The text preview read, "Did you find a husband yet? The neighbor's cat just had kittens. Even the cat is ahead of you." I groaned, flipping the phone face down. I was about to fake a migraine, my go-to escape plan, when the air in the bar shifted. I don't mean the AC kicked on, I mean the atmosphere suddenly felt heavy, charged with static electricity. The hair on my arms stood up. The chatter in the room didn't stop, but it quieted down, like a collective instinct of danger. Even Paul stopped talking about his touchdown stats. I turned on my stool. He was standing at the entrance. He wasn't just tall, he was architectural. Broad shoulders in a charcoal suit jacket that looked tailor-made to restrain him, dark hair swept back, and eyes that scanned the room with the precision of a predator looking for the weakest gazelle, or the loudest one. His gaze locked onto mine. It was physical, like a hand grabbing my chin. He started walking. The crowd parted for him like the Red Sea, people subconsciously stepping out of his path. "Who is that?" Tasha whispered, suddenly very sober. "Trouble," I muttered. He stopped right next to Polo Shirt Paul. He didn't say a word. He just lowered his gaze to the man,
then glanced at the seat, and finally locked eyes with Paul. The fantasy football enthusiast, bless his heart, turned pale, mumbled something about a fluctuating market, and scrambled away. The stranger sat down. He smelled like expensive whiskey, rain, and something earthy, like a forest after a storm. It was intoxicating. "You looked like you needed saving," he said. His voice was a deep rumble that vibrated through the bar stool and straight into my chest. "I can save myself, thanks," I said, crossing my arms to hide the fact that my hands were shaking slightly. "I'm Anna." "Richard," he replied. He signaled the bartender without even looking at him, and a glass of bourbon appeared instantly. "You have a sharp tongue, Anna." "And you have an ego that barely fits in this dive bar," I shot back. He blinked, surprised. Then a slow, lazy grin spread across his face. It was devastating. "Most people don't talk to me like that." "I'm not most people. I'm a broke art student, my feet hurt, and I'm one bad pickup line away from committing a felony." Richard laughed. It was a dark, rich sound. "No pickup lines. Just a drink and maybe your number." We talked for 20 minutes. He was focused, his eyes tracking every movement, but he was also funny. He listened when I ranted about the price of acrylic paint, but there was something too much about him, too possessive. The way he angled his body to block anyone else from looking at me, it triggered my flight response. When he went to the bathroom, Tasha grabbed my arm. "He is gorgeous. Lock that down. Auntie Maureen would actually weep tears of joy." "He's heavy, Tosh. Like, I keep a shrine of you in my closet heavy. I'm bailing." When Richard came back, I was putting on my coat. "Leaving?" he asked, disappointment tightening his jaw. "Early class," I lied. "Can I call you?" I hesitated. He was hot, unbelievably hot, but he was also terrifyingly confident. My brain screamed, "Run." "Sure," I said, grabbing a cocktail napkin. I scribbled a number down. He took the napkin like it was a sacred text. "I'll call you tomorrow, Anna." "Can't wait," I said, flashing a fake smile. I grabbed Tasha and we bolted. I didn't give him my number. I gave him the number for Pete's 24-hour Septic Tank Services.
Chapter 2. The Scent of Lilac and Regret. 3 hours later, the adrenaline had worn off. Tasha was passed out in her room, and I was in the living area of our off-campus dorm suite. I was wearing my most unsexy oversized t-shirt that said, "I paused my game for this," and fuzzy socks with little geese on them. I was scrubbing dried blue paint off my knuckles, smelling like turpentine and my favorite lilac body lotion. My phone rang. I picked it up, expecting it to be Tasha calling from the other room to ask for water. "Anna." It was Auntie Maureen. I winced, pulling the phone away from my ear. "Hi, Auntie Mo, it's 2 a.m. I had a vision. A tall, dark, handsome man, very rich. He is coming for you. Did you meet him? Did you wear the red lipstick I sent you?" "I wore chapstick, Auntie, and the only tall, dark man I met was terrifying." "Terrifying is good," she insisted. "Terrifying means he has assets to protect. You need a man who can buy you a house, not one who asks you to split the bill at Taco Bell. Did you get his number?" "I sort of gave him a number," I hedged. "Good, finally. You know, your cousin Elena is pregnant again. Her husband is a dentist. A dentist, Anna. Meanwhile, you are painting pictures of fruit bowls. They're abstract interpretations of societal decay, Auntie. Fruit bowls. Go to sleep. Wear the silk pajamas, just in case he climbs through the window. Romance is unpredictable." She hung up. I stared at the phone. "If a man climbs through my window, Auntie, I'm hitting him with a frying pan." I tossed the phone onto the couch and picked up my paintbrush. I needed to finish my final project. The canvas in front of me was a mess of blues and grays, much like my life. Knock, knock, knock. I froze. It was a heavy, authoritative knock. Not the RA, and definitely not a pizza delivery guy. I crept to the door and looked through the people. All I saw was a chest, a broad, suit-clad chest. My stomach dropped all the way to my fuzzy goose socks. No way! I unlocked the deadbolts and cracked the door open 3 inches, keeping the chain latch firmly on. Richard was standing in the hallway. He looked annoyed. No, not annoyed. He looked like a volcano trying very hard not to erupt. I stammered. How did you find me? I never told you my last name. I never told you where I live. Richard looked at the chain lock, then at my eyes. His nostrils flared slightly, inhaling the air. Lilacs, he said. His voice was rougher than it had been at the bar, gritty. Lilacs and turpentine. You have a very distinct scent, Anna. You smelled me? I choked out. Okay, that's it. I'm calling the police. You're a stalker. I'm not a stalker, he said, his hand resting on the doorframe. I'm a man who just had a very confusing conversation with a gentleman named Pete about a septic tank backup in District 4. I bit my lip to stop the nervous giggle bubbling up in my throat. Oh, you called. I called, Richard confirmed, his eyes narrowing. Imagine my surprise when, instead of the beautiful, witty woman I met at the bar, I got a man named Pete asking if I needed my pipes flushed. It seemed funny at the time, I squeaked. Look, go away. You can't just show up at a girl's dorm at 2 a.m. Open the door, Anna. No, you're psycho. I need to prove to you that I'm not crazy, and I need to know why you ran. My instincts are telling me something is wrong. Your instincts? Dude, go home. I tried to slam the door. It didn't move. Richard's hand was flat against the wood. He didn't even look like he was straining. He was holding the heavy, fire-safe door open with the casual ease of someone holding a feather. Anna? The tone wasn't a request anymore. It was a command, a vibration that went straight to my spine and made my knees wobble. Open the door. Chapter 3. The Lockdown. My hands moved on their own. I didn't want to open it. My brain was screaming stranger danger, flashing neon warning signs. But my body betrayed me. It was like his voice had hooked into my motor functions. I undid the chain. Richard pushed the door open and stepped inside. He immediately filled the room. The dorm was small, standard university-issue beige walls and sad furniture. But with him inside, it felt microscopic. He kicked the door shut behind him with his heel. Click. The sound of the deadbolt sliding home echoed like a gunshot in the silent room. You locked it, I whispered, backing up until my legs hit the back of the sofa. So you can't run again until we talk, he said calmly. He looked around the room, taking in my half-finished canvases, the piles of art books, and the empty pad thai carton on the coffee table. He looked entirely out of place, like a panther pacing around a hamster cage. Get out, I said, trying to summon the courage I'd had at the bar. I grabbed the closest weapon I could find, a palette knife encrusted with dried blue paint. I held it up like a dagger. I have a knife, and I know how to use it. I watch true crime documentaries. Richard looked at the palette knife. It was dull, flexible, and about as dangerous as a spoon. He looked back at me, one eyebrow arching perfectly. Are you going to paint me to death, Anna? It's sharpish, I bluffed. He chuckled, taking a step toward me. Put the knife down, little one. Don't call me little one. And seriously, how did you track me? Smelling isn't a valid answer unless you're a bloodhound. Wolf, he corrected softly. What? Not a hound, a wolf. He closed the distance between us. I was backed against the sofa, trapped. He didn't grab me, but he leaned down, his face inches from mine. I could feel the heat radiating off him. He was running hot, like a furnace. I tracked you, he murmured, his eyes searching mine. Lilacs. It's rare, pure. Most people carry the stench of chemicals and lies. You feel like home. I smell like poverty and stress, I argued, though my voice was breathless. Richard, seriously, you're scaring me. Who are you? He placed one hand on the back of the sofa, caging me in. He took a deep breath, as if wrestling with himself. I am Richard Blackwood, CEO of Blackwood Enterprises, and the Alpha King of the Silver Moon Pack. I stared at him. The silence stretched for 10 seconds. Then I snorted. Okay, I said, lowering the palette knife. Okay, that's good. Is this for a TikTok? Is Tasha filming this? You're a werewolf? Like Twilight? Do you sparkle? Richard's face darkened. He looked genuinely offended. I do not sparkle. Do you howl? Do you need a flea collar? Anna, he growled. It was a low, vibrating sound that came from deep within his chest. It wasn't human. It rattled the paintbrushes in the jar on my desk. My smile vanished. That sound? That wasn't a sound a human throat could make. You're serious, I whispered. Deadly, he replied. He reached out and gently took the palette knife from my hand, setting it on the table without breaking eye contact. I tracked you because when you walked away from me, my wolf nearly tore this city apart to find you. You gave me a fake number. You insulted me. And yet, he reached up, his thumb brushing my cheekbone. His touch was electric. And yet, here I am, desperate for just 5 minutes of your time. You broke into my dorm, I reminded him, my heart hammering against my ribs. I knocked, he countered, and you let me in. Because you used your spooky voice. Alpha voice, he corrected, and it only works if you want to obey deep down. I do not want to obey you, I snapped, pushing at his chest. It was like pushing a brick wall. I want to pass my art history finals and pay off my student loans. I don't have time for a furry billionaire with boundary issues. Richard grabbed my hand, the one pushing him, and held it against his chest. I could feel his heart beating. It was slow, steady, and powerful. Then I have a proposition, he said, his golden-flecked eyes burning into mine. A bet. I don't gamble. I'm enrolling in this university, he announced. You're what? You're like 30. I'm 28, and I'm enrolling. If I can prove to you in 1 month that I am worth your time, human time, you give me a real date. No fake numbers, no running. And if you lose, then I walk away, he promised, and I'll pay off your student loans as a parting gift. I narrowed my eyes. A debt-free life just for tolerating a crazy hot guy for a month? Fine, I said. You're on, wolf boy, but if you pee on the carpet, the deal is off. Richard smirked, and for a second, he looked ready to devour me right there on the dorm room floor. Deal.
Chapter 4. The Bet and the Exit. Deal, I said, shaking his hand. His skin was rough, warm, and engulfed my hand completely. A jolt of static electricity snapped between us, loud enough to be heard in the quiet dorm room. I jumped, but Richard didn't flinch. He just rubbed his thumb over my knuckles, his eyes darkening to that strange, liquid amber color. 1 month, he murmured. I will prove I am not just a furry billionaire. I will prove I am the man you need. And if you lose, I reminded him, trying to ignore the way my heart was doing gymnastics in my chest, you pay off my loans and you disappear. No stalking, no sniffing my door. Agreed. He released my hand. The room suddenly felt 10 degrees colder without his touch. He straightened his suit jacket, the fabric straining slightly against his shoulders. For a second, he looked at the door he'd just locked. I should go, he said, though he didn't move. If I stay in this room with your scent any longer, I'm going to do something that will definitely violate the terms of our bet. I crossed my arms, trying to look unimpressed. Like what? Howl at the moon? Like kiss you until you forget your own name, he said. The words were simple, matter-of-fact, and delivered with such intense gravity that my breath hitched. He smirked at my reaction. Good night, Anna. He unlocked the deadbolt, opened the door, and stepped out into the hallway. Wait, I called out. He paused, looking back. Hope flickered in his eyes. You still haven't explained how you're going to enroll. Semester started 3 weeks ago. You can't just walk into a university and demand a schedule. Richard adjusted his cufflinks. I'm the Alpha King, Anna. Rules are generally suggestions for people like me. I'll see you in class. He walked away. I slammed the door and locked it, sliding the chain back into place. I leaned my forehead against the wood, exhaling a breath I didn't know I was holding. Tasha stumbled out of her bedroom, hair looking like a bird's nest, holding an empty water bottle. "Who was here?" she croaked. "I heard a man's voice. Did you order a stripper?" "No," I whispered, sliding down the door until I hit the floor. "I think I just accidentally agreed to date a werewolf." Tasha blinked, processed this, and then shrugged. "Does he have a brother? Rent is due on the 1st. Chapter 5. Art History 401. Monday morning arrived with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. I was running on 3 hours of sleep and a diet of caffeine and anxiety. I dragged myself across campus to the Fine Arts Building, clutching my portfolio case like a shield. Art History 401, The Renaissance to Modernism. It was a required seminar, usually taught by Professor Vance, a man who loved the sound of his own voice so much he once debated a statue. I slid into my usual seat in the second row. Tasha sat next to me, already scrolling on TikTok. "You look terrible," Tasha noted helpfully. "Thanks. I kept dreaming about wolves chasing me, but instead of eating me, they were trying to help me file my taxes. It was disturbing." The lecture hall door opened, the room went silent. Professor Vance walked in, looking flustered. He was sweating. He dropped his briefcase on the desk. "Good morning, students," Vance squeaked. We have a new auditor joining us today, a very distinguished guest. Please, no one stare." Everyone turned to stare at the door. Richard walked in. He wasn't wearing a suit today. He was wearing dark jeans and a black hoodie that fit him so well it should be illegal. It was casual, but on him, it looked like high fashion. He had a backpack slung over one shoulder. The air in the room shifted. That heavy, predatory pressure returned. Half the class sat up straighter. Richard scanned the room, his eyes locked on me instantly. A small, triumphant smile touched his lips. He walked up the aisle. Every girl he passed tracked him like a radar dish. He stopped at the empty desk directly to my right. "Is this seat taken?" he asked, his voice low and raspy. I gaped at him. "You have got to be kidding me." "I told you," he whispered, sitting down. He was so big he practically spilled over into my personal space. I'm a man of my word. "You're auditing art history?" I hissed. "You look like you eat art for breakfast." I have a deep appreciation for the Renaissance, the brutality hidden beneath the beauty. It's very relatable. Professor Vance cleared his throat nervously. "Right, let's discuss Titian." The lecture began. I tried to focus, I really did, but it's hard to focus on 16th century oil paintings when there is a 6'4" werewolf radiating body heat next to you. Every time I shifted, he shifted. Every time I sighed, his ear twitched. Midway through the lecture, my stomach growled, loudly. Without looking away from the projector screen, Richard reached into his bag and slid a granola bar onto my desk. It was my favorite brand, chocolate chip. I stared at the bar, then at him. He wrote something in his notebook and nudged it toward me. "Eat. You smell hungry. It's distracting my wolf." I grabbed his pen and wrote back, "Stop sniffing me, you creep." He read it, chuckled silently, and wrote, "Stop smelling like heaven and I'll consider it." I ate the granola bar. I hated how good it tasted. Chapter 6. The Budget Cut. By Wednesday, the novelty of having a bodyguard, stalker, classmate had worn off, replaced by a crushing reality check. I was in the studio, staring at my half-finished installation. It was a massive sculpture made of recycled metal and canvas, meant to represent the weight of expectations. It was also expensive to build. Dean Miller walked in, looking grim. "Anna," he said, not making eye contact, "we need to talk."
10 minutes later, I was sitting on the floor of the empty hallway, trying not to cry. The funding was gone. The department had overspent on the digital media lab, and the budget for the senior showcase, my ticket to getting a gallery placement, my ticket to a career, was slashed. I had to come up with $5,000 for materials and venue fees by Friday, or I couldn't present. I didn't have $2,000. I had $40 and a coupon for a free McFlurry. Anna? I looked up. Richard was standing there. He wasn't in his hoodie. He was back in a suit, looking like he owned the building. Maybe he did. He saw my face, red eyes, blotchy skin, and his expression shifted from casual to murderous in a split second. He was on his knees in front of me. "Who?" he growled. "Who hurt you? Give me a name, Anna. I will end them." "It's not a person," I sniffled, wiping my nose on my sleeve. "It's the budget." "The budget?" He looked confused. "You're crying over accounting?" "It's my senior project," I explained, the words tumbling out. I hadn't planned to tell him. I wanted to keep him at arm's length, but I was tired, and he was there, and he looked at me like I was the only thing in the world that mattered. "It's my senior project. They cut the funding. If I can't pay the fees by Friday, I can't showcase. If I can't showcase, I don't graduate with honors. I fail. I'll have to move back home and work at my dad's hardware store forever." I buried my face in my hands. I just wanted to make something beautiful. That's all. For a long moment, Richard didn't say anything. Then I felt his hand on my head. He stroked my hair, awkwardly but gently. "Your art is important to you," he stated. It wasn't a question. "It's everything," I whispered. "It's the only thing that's mine." Richard was quiet. I peeked through my fingers. He was staring at the wall, his jaw set hard, his eyes calculating. He looked like a general planning a war. "Then you will showcase," he said firmly. "Anna, I promise you, you will showcase." "You can't fix this, Richard, unless you have a magical money tree." He stood up, offering me a hand to pull me up. He didn't offer to pay. He didn't pull out a checkbook. He knew somehow that if he offered me charity right now, I would hate him for it. "I'm an alpha," he said, a mischievous glint entering his eyes. "We're very good at finding resources. Now, wipe your face. You look like a raccoon." "Shut up," I muttered, but I took the handkerchief he offered. It smelled like him. "Come on," he said. "I'm taking you to lunch. Pete sent me a text saying the taco truck on 5th Street is life-changing. We should investigate." I managed a weak smile. "You're texting Pete?" "He sends me memes," Richard said seriously. "The man is a visionary." As we walked out, Richard paused to type a quick message on his phone. He thought I didn't see it. I didn't see who it was to, but I saw the determination in his face. He wasn't just my classmate. He was a king preparing to move mountains, or budgets, for his queen. And for the first time, I didn't want to run away.
Chapter 7. The Scrap Metal Miracle. I spent Thursday morning aggressively staring at my bank account app, hoping that if I glared hard enough, a zero would magically appear. It didn't. I was sitting on the floor of the studio, surrounded by twisted wires and hopelessness, when Richard walked in. He was wearing work boots, actual, scuffed, steel-toed boots with his designer jeans. It was a confusing look that did things to my insides I wasn't ready to examine. "You look like you're plotting a bank heist," he noted, dropping his backpack. "I'm considering it," I muttered. "Or maybe selling a kidney. Do I really need two?" Richard sat on a stool, spinning it around to face me. "I have a problem, Anna, and I think you can fix it." I blinked. "You have a problem? You're the king of whatever you are. Don't you have minions for problems?" "I do, but this is a corporate sustainability issue. My construction firm is renovating the West Side Tower. We have tons of high-grade copper, steel mesh, and industrial wiring that we stripped out. It's sitting in a warehouse." He leaned forward, looking genuinely stressed. "It costs me a fortune to haul it to the recycling plant." He lied. I could tell he was lying because he was too smooth, but I listened anyway.
And the warehouse? It's empty. My insurance premiums are skyrocketing because the building is vacant. I need a tenant to occupy the space for a few weeks to get the insurers off my back. I narrowed my eyes. So you have piles of metal you want to get rid of and a free building you need filled? Exactly, he said, spreading his hands. It's a nightmare. I was hoping, well, your project is about urban decay and rebirth, right? Would you be willing to take the scrap metal off my hands and maybe host your showcase in my warehouse? You'd be doing me a massive favor. I'd even pay for the transport just to get the metal out of my sight. I stared at him. It sounded plausible. Just boring corporate bureaucracy. It didn't sound like charity. It sounded like I was helping him dodge an insurance fee. You want me to use your trash? I asked, slowly. Please, he said, looking at me with those golden-flecked eyes. You'd be saving me hours of paperwork. I bit my lip. If I used his scrap, I wouldn't need to buy materials. If I used his warehouse, I wouldn't need to pay the university venue fee. Okay, I said slowly, I'll help you out, but only because I hate seeing good copper go to waste. Richard's face remained serious, but I swore I saw his ear twitch in victory. You're a lifesaver, Anna. I'll have the trucks here in 60 minutes. True to his word, an hour later, 3 trucks arrived. The scrap metal was the cleanest, most high-quality industrial copper I had ever seen. It looked brand new. This is trash? I asked, holding up a pristine coil of wire. Richard shrugged, not meeting my eyes. Rich people throw away crazy things. It's a tax write-off. Don't overthink it. He grabbed a welding mask from the truck. Now, where do you want this beam? I'm yours for the afternoon. Put me to work.
Chapter 8. The Green-Eyed Monster. By Friday, the studio was buzzing. Richard's scrap had transformed my project from a sad pile of junk into a gleaming, towering structure. And Richard, well, he was useful. He lifted beams that 3 guys usually struggled with, all while pretending to strain so I wouldn't get suspicious. We were laughing about his inability to use a glue gun. He kept crushing them with his grip when the studio door banged open. A girl walked in. She was stunning in a terrifying way. Platinum blonde hair, 6-inch heels, and a white dress that looked like it cost more than my parents' house. She scanned the room, sneering at the dust, until her eyes landed on Richard. "Richard," she purred, "so the rumors are true. The Alpha King is playing with arts and crafts?" Richard stiffened. The playful guy who had glue on his thumb vanished. The king returned. His posture straightened, and the temperature in the room dropped. "Sloane," he acknowledged coldly, "this is a closed studio." "I transferred," she said, flipping her hair. "Daddy thought I needed more culture." She walked over to my station. She looked me up and down like I was a stain on the carpet. "And this must be the charity case. Anna, right? I heard you couldn't afford the venue fee. How embarrassing." "I'm hosting off-site," I said, wiping grease off my hands. "And the only thing embarrassing here, Sloane, is wearing white to a sculpture studio. You're going to get dirty." Sloane's eyes narrowed. They flashed a sickly yellow color for a split second. "Oops," she said. She swung her oversized designer bag, aiming specifically for the gallon bucket of black industrial paint sitting on the edge of my table. It happened in slow motion. The bag hit the bucket. The heavy bucket tipped. It was falling directly onto my finished canvas sketches, weeks of work about to be ruined. I gasped, lunging for it, but I was too far away. Whoosh! A blur of motion. 1 second, Richard was 10 feet away by the welding station. The next second, he was there. He didn't just catch the bucket, he snatched it mid-air, his other hand moving in a blur to cup the splashing liquid before a single drop could hit the paper. Not a drop landed on my sketches. The room went silent. Richard stood there, holding the bucket, his hand dripping with black paint. He looked at Sloane with a gaze that promised murder. "You tripped," Richard said. His voice was soft, but it sounded like a growl.
Sloane looked terrified. She took a step back. Yes, my heel. Clumsy me. I stared at Richard. No human could move that fast. It was physically impossible. How did you do that? I whispered. Richard turned to me. The rage vanished from his eyes, replaced with a mask of innocence. He wiped his paint-covered hand on a rag. Reflexes, he said. I played badminton in college. Very competitive. Badminton? I repeated. It's a high-stakes sport, Anna. Lots of lunging. He grabbed Sloane's arm, gentle enough not to bruise, hard enough to steer. Sloane was just leaving. She has a sudden urge to drop the class. He marched her out the door. I stood there looking at the bucket he'd saved. Badminton. Right.
Chapter 9. The Withdrawal. The weekend was supposed to be a celebration. The project was saved, the materials were prepped, and I had a venue. But when I walked into art history on Monday, the seat next to me was empty. I sat down, feeling pathetic. I checked my phone. No texts. Professor Vance started lecturing on surrealism, but I couldn't focus. I kept waiting for the door to open. I kept waiting for the smell of rain and expensive cologne. My phone buzzed. It was Auntie Maureen. Auntie Mo, why aren't you married yet? The butcher's son is single. He has a lazy eye, but he owns a van. Consider it. I sighed, putting the phone away. Then another buzz. A text from an unknown number. Unknown. Had to leave town. Emergency at the main office. Don't pout, you'll get wrinkles. I texted back, I'm not pouting, and who is this? Unknown. It's Richard. Pete gave me your number. Well, technically he gave me the number of a septic truck driver named Sal, but I tracked you down. I smiled at my phone, ignoring Professor Vance's glare. Me. Is everything okay? Richard. Just business, a hostile takeover attempt. Parentheses. Rogues. I'll be back for your showcase. I wouldn't miss it. Richard. P.S. There's a latte in the hallway for you. I had it delivered. Drink it before it gets cold. I looked at the door. I raised my hand. Bathroom break. I ran out into the hallway. Sitting on the bench was a large latte and a chocolate croissant. I picked up the cup. On the sleeve, in sharp, angular handwriting, he had written, Fuel for the Genius. I took a sip. It was perfect. Hazelnut, extra shot, oat milk. I'd never told him my order. I leaned against the wall, sipping the coffee, and realized two terrifying things. One, he had definitely sniffed out my coffee preference. Two, I missed him. I missed the way he loomed over me. I missed his terrible lies about scrap metal. I missed the safety of having a 6'4" badminton champion barding my art. You're in trouble, Anna, I whispered to myself. I walked back into class, unaware that 300 miles away, Richard was currently standing in a forest clearing, wiping blood off his hands, ensuring that the city and I remained safe enough for an art show. Chapter 10. The Return of the King. 3 days without Richard felt suspiciously like 3 years. I told myself I was relieved. No intense staring, no vibrating alpha voice, no weird scrap metal schemes. I could finally focus on my installation in the warehouse. But the warehouse was big and cold and echoey. It was 10 p.m. on a Tuesday. I was up on a ladder welding a joint on the main structure. The sparks flew like tiny fireworks, dying on the concrete floor. My phone buzzed in my back pocket. I flipped up my welding mask. Auntie Mo, the butcher's son got engaged to a yoga instructor. A yoga instructor, Anna? She doesn't even eat meat. You missed your chance. Now you must find a lawyer or a very successful plumber. I sighed, typing back, I'm busy welding, Auntie. I'll find a plumber later. I climbed down the ladder to grab a water bottle. The warehouse was silent, shadows stretching long across the floor. A sudden noise, a scuff of a boot on concrete, made me freeze. My heart hammered. This neighborhood wasn't exactly Mr. Rogers' territory. Hello? I called out, gripping a heavy wrench. I have a blowtorch and I'm very caffeinated. From the shadows near the loading dock, a figure emerged. Richard. He looked
rough. His suit was wrinkled, his tie was gone, and there was a smear of dirt, or was that dried blood, on his jawline. He looked like he'd walked through a hurricane to get here. "Richard?" I dropped the wrench. It clanged loudly. He didn't speak. He crossed the distance between us in long, urgent strides. He stopped 3 feet away, his chest heaving slightly. He inhaled deeply, his eyes fluttering shut for a second. "Lilacs," he breathed out, his shoulders dropping as tension left his body. "Thank God." "You look terrible," I said, stepping closer. "What happened? The hostile takeover?" He opened his eyes. The gold flecks were swirling frantically against the brown. "It was messy, but it's handled." He looked at me, really looked at me, scanning for injuries. "You've been here alone? At night?" "I have a wrench," I pointed out. Richard looked at the wrench on the floor, then at me. A tired smile tugged at his lips. "You are terrifying, Anna." "I try. Where have you been?" "Fixing things," he said vaguely. He reached out, his hand hovering near my face, then pulled back, as if he didn't want to dirty me. I didn't think. I reached out and grabbed his hand, the rough, calloused hand that definitely punched something recently, and pressed it against my cheek. He froze. His skin was burning hot. "I missed you," I admitted, the words slipping out before I could stop them. Richard made a sound, a low rumble in his chest that vibrated through his fingertips and into my skin. He stepped closer, his other hand coming up to cup my face, holding me like I was precious porcelain. "I haven't slept in 72 hours, he rasped. "All I could think about was getting back here, to this warehouse, to you." "To check on your scrap metal?" I teased weakly. "Screw the metal," he growled softly, his thumb tracing my lower lip. "I came back for the artist." Chapter 11. The Silent Study Session. The next day, Richard was back to his polished self. The dirt and exhaustion were gone, replaced by a crisp navy suit and that terrifying levels of energy. He cornered me after class. "Library," he announced. "Excuse me?" "We're going to the library. I need to study." "You need to study?" I laughed, adjusting my backpack. "Richard, you corrected Professor Vance yesterday on the date of the French Revolution without looking at a book. You don't study." "I need to study campus culture," he improvised smoothly. "And I need a tutor. That's you." 10 minutes later, we were in the quietest corner of the university library. We were sitting at a small table, our knees bumping under the wood. Richard had a pile of history books open, but he wasn't reading them. He was watching me sketch. "Stop staring," I whispered, not looking up from my sketchbook. "I'm observing," he whispered back. "It's educational." He reached over and tapped the history textbook in front of him. "This book is wrong, by the way." "It's the standard text, Richard. It says the Battle of Waterloo was lost because of weather. It wasn't weather. It was incompetent supply lines and a very stubborn horse." I looked up. "And how would you know about Napoleon's supply lines?" Richard froze. He blinked. "I saw a documentary, once. Very detailed." I rolled my eyes. "You're ridiculous." "I'm accurate." He leaned in closer. The library was dead silent, the smell of old paper and dust mixing with his scent of rain and spice. The intimacy of it was overwhelming. We weren't touching, but the air between us was thick enough to cut with a knife. A guy from my English class walked by. He stopped when he saw me. "Hey, Anna," the guy whispered, smiling. "You look nice today." Richard didn't look up from his book. He just turned the page, but as he did, a low, barely audible growl emanated from his throat. Grrr. The guy stopped smiling. He looked confused, looking around for a dog. He looked at Richard's broad shoulders, turned pale, and walked away very quickly. I kicked Richard under the table. "Ouch," he said, not sounding in pain at all. I said, "Stop growling at people," I hissed. I was clearing my throat. "You sounded like a chainsaw in a tuxedo." Richard smirked, finally looking up from the book. He took his pen and drew a small heart on the corner of my sketchbook page. "Focus on your art, little one. Let me handle the perimeter." "I don't need a perimeter. I'm in a library." You'd be surprised, he said darkly. Paper cuts are dangerous. I fought a smile and lost. He was impossible, and I was starting to really like it. Chapter 12. The Paintbrush Ritual. Friday night was crunch time. The showcase was in 2 days. I was in the warehouse, fueled by panic and stale donuts. I was covered in paint. It was in my hair, on my face, and I'm pretty sure I had tasted some. My hands were cramping. I dropped my favorite brush. It splattered gray paint across my sneaker. I quit, I announced to the empty room. I'm going to become a hermit. I'll live in a cave. Caves have terrible Wi-Fi, a voice said. I spun around. Richard was walking across the warehouse floor. He was carrying 2 takeout bags and a massive jug of iced tea. Food, he commanded. Sit. I sat on a crate. I can't stop, Richard. I have 20 brushes to clean, and the varnish needs a second coat, and… Sit. He used the alpha voice again. My knees buckled, and I sat. Stop doing that, I complained, tearing into a spring roll. Eat. I'll handle the cleanup. I watched, stunned, as the billionaire king took off his suit jacket, folded it neatly on a clean crate, and rolled up his white dress shirt sleeves to his elbows. His forearms were thick, corded with muscle and veins. He walked over to the utility sink. He grabbed my bucket of dirty, chemical-soaked brushes. Richard, don't, I said with a mouthful of noodles. Those are disgusting. It's turpentine and oil. The fumes are toxic. He flinched slightly as the fumes hit him, his nose wrinkling, but he didn't stop. It burns the senses, he admitted tightly, but I heal fast. He turned on the tap. For the next 30 minutes, the only sound in the cavernous warehouse was the running water and the swish-swish of him scrubbing my brushes. I watched him. There is something incredibly intimate about someone cleaning your tools. It's not buying you a car. It's doing the dirty, boring, unglamorous work so you don't have to. He scrubbed every bristle until it was pristine. He reshaped the tips with his fingers. He dried them and laid them out in a perfect row. He turned off the tap and dried his hands. He leaned against the sink, watching me eat. Better? I swallowed hard. My chest felt tight. Why are you doing this? I asked quietly. You're a king. You run an empire. Why are you washing my paintbrushes at midnight? Richard walked over. He stood in front of me, blocking out the harsh warehouse lights. He reached down and used his thumb to wipe a smudge of gray paint off my nose. Because, he said softly, a king serves his queen, and right now your kingdom is this canvas. I'm not a queen, Richard. I'm just a girl with a lot of student debt. He smiled. A genuine, soft smile that didn't have a trace of arrogance in it. We'll see, he whispered. You have paint in your hair. I know. It looks good on you. He leaned down and kissed my forehead. It wasn't a sexual kiss. It was a promise. Finish your noodles, Anna. I'm going to varnish the base, and if you argue with me, I'll growl. I didn't argue. I just watched him work, realizing with a terrifying certainty that I wasn't just losing the bet, I was losing my heart. Chapter 13. Meet the Parents and the Lie. My father, Arthur, was a man of simple pleasures, hardware stores, lukewarm coffee, and interrogating any male who came within a 10-foot radius of me. When he called to say he was driving up for the day to bring me some emergency tools, a backup hammer, I panicked. I met him at Louie's diner near campus. I didn't tell Richard. I thought I was safe. I was wrong. 10 minutes into lunch, while my dad was explaining the difference between Phillips and flathead screwdrivers, the diner door opened. Richard walked in. Of course he did. He probably smelled my dad's aftershave, Old Spice and sawdust from 3 blocks away. He spotted us, smiled that devastating smile, and walked over. Anna, he said, acting surprised, I didn't know you were here. I'm eating fries, Richard. Go away, I signaled with my eyes. And who is this? My dad asked, wiping ketchup off his chin. He squinted at Richard's Italian suit. You look like a lawyer. I don't trust lawyers. I'm Richard, he said, extending a hand. A friend of Anna's. My dad shook his hand, squeezing hard. It was the dad test. Richard didn't even blink. He just smiled politely, letting my dad think he had the upper hand, though I knew Richard could probably crush a bowling ball with that grip. "Friend, huh?" Dad grunted. "What do you do, Richard? You look expensive." I froze. If Richard said, "I'm a billionaire CEO and a king," my dad would have a stroke. Richard didn't miss a beat. "I work in waste management," Richard lied smoothly. I choked on a fry. "Waste management?" Dad asked, perking up. "Solid industry, recession-proof. What sector?" "Sanitation logistics, septic security, ensuring the flow is uninterrupted." I kicked Richard under the table. He ignored me. "No kidding," Dad beamed. "Anna, this guy has a real job, not like that poet you dated. Pete, is that who you work for?" Richard's lips twitched. "Pete is a consultant, a visionary in the field." "Good man," Dad nodded approvingly. "So, Richard, do you have a retirement plan? 401k? "I have significant assets in land and gold." "Gold is good, very stable." Dad leaned back, satisfied. "You can sit down, Rick. You want a burger? They make 'em greasy here." For the next hour, I watched in horror and fascination as the alpha king of the Silver Moon Pack discussed the merits of galvanized steel pipes versus PVC with my father. Richard listened intently, nodding, asking questions about thread counts on screws. He wasn't condescending, he was genuinely engaging my dad. When we finally left, Dad pulled me into a bear hug. "I like him, Anne. He knows about plumbing. And he looks at you like you're the only person in the room. Keep that one." I looked at Richard, who was waiting by his Mercedes, which he had told my dad was a company car. He winked at me. "Waste management?" I hissed as I walked up to him. "I panicked," he admitted, "but my dad likes me. I'm now officially Rick from Sanitation." "You're impossible." "I'm adaptable," he corrected. "And I paid the check while you were in the bathroom."
Chapter 14. The Growl. The good mood from the diner lasted exactly 24 hours. On Thursday, we were in the studio for a group critique. The entire class was gathered around my installation, which was finally looking impressive thanks to Richard's scrap metal. I was presenting my concept. Richard was leaning against the back wall, arms crossed, watching me with that intense pride that made my stomach do flip-flops. Then Brad spoke up. Brad was a junior with a ponytail and an unearned sense of superiority. He stepped forward, getting way too close to my sculpture, and to me. "It's interesting," Brad said, reaching out to touch the delicate wire mesh I had spent hours shaping. "But it feels a bit derivative, and the structure looks weak here." He grabbed a support beam and shook it, hard. "Hey," I snapped, "don't touch it, it's not set yet." "Relax, babe," Brad said, laughing. He put a hand on my shoulder, squeezing it in a way that was meant to be comforting, but felt patronizing and slimy. "I'm just testing the integrity. You don't want it falling on your pretty head." He didn't remove his hand. Suddenly, the air in the room got heavy. The temperature dropped 10 degrees. A sound started. It was low, vibrating, and deep. It sounded like a subwoofer turned to max volume, or distant thunder trapped inside a cave. Grrr. The sound was so visceral, I felt it in the soles of my feet. Everyone froze. Professor Vance looked around wildly. Is the radiator acting up?" Brad dropped his hand from my shoulder like it had been burned. He looked pale. I looked at the back of the room. Richard hadn't moved. His arms were still crossed, but his eyes, oh God, his eyes were glowing. Not just flecks of gold, but fully, unmistakably amber, and his lips were pulled back slightly, revealing teeth that looked sharper than they had 10 seconds ago. He was staring at Brad. If looks could kill, Brad would be a pile of ash. Grrr. The sound came again, louder this time. It was definitely coming from Richard. I rushed over to him, blocking his view of Brad. "Richard," I whispered frantically, "stop it, you sound like a tractor." Richard blinked. He looked down at me, shaking his head as if waking up from a trance. The amber faded back to brown. "He touched you," Richard said. His voice was thick, strangled. "He put his hand on you."
He's an idiot, Richard. He's not a threat. You can't growl at my classmates. People are staring. Richard took a deep breath, adjusting his tie. I apologize. My wolf disagrees with his assessment of your structural integrity and his proximity. You have to control it. They're going to think you're rabid. If he touches you again, Richard said calmly, he won't have a hand to critique with. Okay, time to go, I said, grabbing his arm and dragging him out of the studio before he could maul Brad. As we left, I heard Professor Vance muttering, I really need to call maintenance about that HVAC system.
Chapter 15. The Invitation. After the HVAC incident, I dragged Richard to the campus coffee shop to calm him down. I forced him to drink chamomile tea. He looked at the tiny cup with disdain. I don't drink flowers, Anna. You do today. Drink the flowers, Cujo. You almost shifted in front of the entire art department. Richard sighed, taking a sip. I didn't almost shift. I just expressed my displeasure vocally. You growled, like a dog guarding a bone. I am not a dog, he corrected instantly. And you are not a bone. You are my mate. It's different. There was that word again, mate. He said it with a capital M. I looked down at my latte foam. You keep saying that, like it's a legal term. It's more binding than legal, he said quietly, but I promised I wouldn't push the supernatural aspect until the month is up. He set the tea down. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a heavy cream-colored envelope embossed with gold leaf. He slid it across the table. What's this? I asked. An invitation, the annual Moonlight Charity Gala. It's this Saturday. I opened it. The cardstock cost more than my weekly grocery budget. Black tie, the Grand Hotel. I can't go to this, Richard. This is for fancy people who know which fork to use. I'm a girl who eats cereal out of a mug because I haven't washed dishes in 3 days. You are coming, he said firmly, for 2 reasons. 1, it's a massive networking event. The city's top gallery owners will be there. If you want a career, you need to meet them. He had me there. That was actually a good point. And 2? 2, Richard leaned in, his voice dropping to that velvet texture that made my toes curl. You are coming because I want to see you in a dress. I want to walk into that room with you on my arm and watch every other man in the city realize that the most incredible woman in the room is with me. I blushed. I couldn't help it. My face heated up. I don't have a dress for something like that, I mumbled. I assumed as much. My stylist will be at your dorm at 4 p.m. tomorrow. Do not argue with her. Her name is Coco, and she scares even me. You're bossy, I told him. I'm efficient. Say yes, Anna. I looked at the invitation. I looked at Richard, the man who washed my paintbrushes, charmed my dad, and growled at jerks who touched me. Fine, I said. I'll go, but if Coco tries to put me in pink, I'm biting her. Richard smirked. I'd pay to see that. Chapter 16. The Lady in Red. Coco, the stylist, did not bring pink. She brought a dress that was the color of a fresh crime scene. It's red, I said, staring at myself in the dorm mirror. Like, really red. It is ox blood, Coco corrected, pulling a strap tighter until I couldn't breathe. And it is non-negotiable. The king gave specific instructions. Make her look like she owns the room. The dress was silk, floor-length, with a slit up the leg that was bordering on scandalous, and a back that plunged dangerously low. It fit like a second skin. When I walked out of the dorm building at 6 p.m., Richard was leaning against the Mercedes. He was wearing a black tuxedo that fit him so perfectly it made my mouth go dry. He looked up. He stopped breathing. He didn't say a word. He just walked over, his eyes traveling from the hem of the dress up to my face. The hunger in his gaze was so raw, I almost took a step back. Well, I asked, twirling nervously, do I look like I own the room? You look like you're going to burn the room down, he rasped. He opened the car door.
Get in before I decide to skip the gala and take you back upstairs." The gala was held at the Grand Hotel. It was exactly as pretentious as I expected. Chandeliers the size of Toyotas, waiters serving food I couldn't pronounce, and women wearing diamonds heavy enough to cause neck strain. I felt like an imposter. I gripped Richard's arm tight. "Relax," he whispered, covering my hand with his. "You're the most interesting person here." We hadn't been there 5 minutes before she appeared. Sloane glided toward us. She was wearing silver, looking like a knife blade in human form. "Richard," she greeted, ignoring me, "the council is waiting for you in the VIP lounge." She finally glanced at me, her lip curling. "And you brought the charity case. Bold choice, Richard. Although that dress, it's a bit loud, isn't it? You look like a ketchup stain on a white tablecloth." I felt Richard stiffen beside me. I squeezed his arm to stop him from growling. I stepped forward, smiling sweetly. "Better to be the stain than the napkin, Sloane. At least people notice the stain. The napkin just gets used to wipe up the mess and thrown in the trash." Richard choked on a laugh. Sloane's eyes flashed that sickly yellow again. Her jaw worked. "Enjoy the party, human. It might be your last." She stomped away. "Did she just threaten me?" I asked. She's dramatic, though his eyes were tracking Sloane's exit with cold precision. "Come on, let's dance."
Chapter 17. The Blackout. "I don't dance," I protested as he pulled me onto the marble floor. I sway anxiously while hoping the song ends. "Follow my lead," Richard murmured. He pulled me flush against him, one hand on my waist, the other holding my hand against his chest. He moved with a grace that was unnatural for a man of his size. We didn't just dance, we glided. For a moment, the world fell away. There was no debt, no art project, no snobby wolves, just the heat of his body and the smell of rain and spice. "You're doing well," he whispered against my ear. "I'm trying not to step on your expensive shoes." He spun me out and pulled me back in. "I have a confession. I didn't bring you here to network." I knew it. "I brought you here because I wanted to know what it felt like to hold you without you running away." I looked up at him. "I'm not running, Richard." He leaned down. His lips brushed mine, a feather-light touch that sent sparks shooting through my veins. Crash! The massive glass skylight above the ballroom shattered. The music cut out. The lights died instantly, plunging the room into darkness. Screams erupted. Richard changed instantly. The charming date vanished. The alpha took over. He shoved me behind him, his body becoming a human shield. "Stay behind me," he roared, his voice booming over the panic of the crowd. Figures dropped from the ceiling on ropes. They were dressed in tactical gear, but they moved like animals. They landed on the tables, snarling. "Rogues!" someone screamed. "Anna," Richard said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "Run to the service exit, now." "I'm not leaving you." "Go." A creature lunged at us from the shadows. He had glowing red eyes and teeth that were too long for human. Richard met him mid-air. I watched in horror as Richard caught the attacker by the throat with one hand and slammed him into a marble pillar with enough force to crack the stone. "Get her," the attacker wheezed. "Get the human." They were here for me. Richard snarled, a sound that shook the floorboards. He grabbed my arm and dragged me toward a heavy oak door near the kitchen. He threw it open. It was a reinforced panic room or supply vault. He shoved me inside. "Lock it," he commanded. "Do not open it until you hear my voice." "Richard!" I screamed, reaching for him. He slammed the door in my face. Chapter 18. The Impossible Healing. I locked the door. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the deadbolt. I backed into the darkness of the closet, clutching a bottle of expensive champagne I'd grabbed off a waiter's tray as a weapon. Outside, hell broke loose. It didn't sound like a gunfight. It sounded like a zoo had exploded. There were growls, wet, guttural, animalistic snarls, the sound of furniture shattering, the sound of bodies hitting walls. I huddled in the corner, covering my ears. What is happening? Who are these people? Why do they want me? The sounds of violence lasted for 10 minutes. Then, silence. Dead silence. "Richard," I whispered. No answer. "Richard!" I yelled, banging on the door. "Anna." His voice was weak. It came from right outside the door. "It's safe. Open up." I fumbled with the lock and threw the door open. The hallway was a wreck, but I only saw him. Richard was sitting on the floor, leaning against the opposite wall. His tuxedo jacket was gone. His white shirt was shredded. There were 3 massive claw marks raked across his chest, deep, jagged wounds that were oozing sluggishly. "Oh my God," I sobbed, dropping to my knees beside him. "You're hurt. We need an ambulance. Someone call 911. "No," Richard grunted, grabbing my wrist. His palm was stained with blood that wasn't his. "No hospitals." "Richard, you're hemorrhaging. Look at your torso." I tried to press my palms against the wounds to stop the flow, but he pulled them away. He extended a hand to help me up. I looked at his hand, the hand that had just healed from a mortal wound in seconds. "Don't touch me," I whispered. Richard's hand dropped. The pain on his face was worse than the claw marks had been. "Let me take you home, and then I'll tell you everything." Chapter 19. The Truth and the Bent Pipe. The drive back to my dorm was silent. Richard drove the Mercedes with white-knuckled precision, his jaw tight enough to snap steel. He didn't take me to the dorm. He took me to the Apex Tower, his penthouse. "I'm not going up there," I said, clutching my seatbelt. "I want to go home." "You are not safe at the dorm, Anna. Those things, they know where you live. You're coming up. We need to talk." He didn't wait for an argument. He walked around, opened my door, and offered his hand. I looked at his hand, the one that had healed itself, and hesitated. But the memory of those glowing red eyes in the ballroom made the dorm seem a lot less appealing. I took his hand. The penthouse was all glass and chrome, looking out over the city. It was beautiful and cold. Richard poured himself a drink. He didn't offer me one. He downed the amber liquid in one swallow and turned to face me. "Ask," he said. "What are you?" I whispered, "and don't say waste management consultant." He sighed, unbuttoning his shredded shirt and tossing it onto a chair. I tried not to look at his chest, smooth, muscular, and completely scar-free. "I am a lichen, a werewolf, and the alpha of the Silver Moon Pack." I stared at him. I waited for the punchline. "Okay," I said slowly. "So you turn into a wolf, like a dog? Do you chase cars? Do you have to be wormed?" "It's not a joke, Anna." He took a step toward me. "I was born this way. My father was alpha. His father was alpha. We live among humans. We run companies. We pay taxes. But we are predators." "And the eyes?" I asked, my voice trembling. "At the studio? At the gala?" "My wolf," he explained. "He's close to the surface when you're around. He recognizes you." "Recognizes me as what? Lunch?" "As his mate." He said the word with such intensity that the windows seemed to vibrate. "Stop saying that," I snapped, backing up until I hit the kitchen island. "I'm a human. I'm an art student with $40 in my bank account. I'm not a mate to a supernatural creature." "You don't believe me." "I don't want to believe you. I saw what happened in the hallway, Richard, but my brain is trying to tell me it was a hallucination. People don't heal in 10 seconds. That's impossible physics." Richard looked around the room. He grabbed a heavy steel pipe that was part of an industrial sculpture in the corner. Ironic. It was solid steel, an inch thick. He held it up. "Watch." He didn't strain. He didn't grunt. He just tightened his grip. Creak! The steel groaned. Under his fingers, the metal bent like it was made of wet clay. He twisted it into a perfect loop, then tossed it on the marble counter with a heavy clang. I looked at the twisted metal. I looked at him. "Okay," I squeaked. "Point taken. You're strong.
You heal fast. You have anger issues. You're a werewolf. I grabbed my purse. I can't do this, I said, my voice rising in panic. I can't. This is too much. I gave a fake number to a guy at a bar, and now I'm in a sci-fi movie? I want to go home. Anna, please. Take me home, Richard, or I swear to God I will scream until the neighbors call the police, and I don't care if you can bend steel. You can't fight a SWAT team. Richard looked at me, really looked at me, and saw the terror in my eyes. His shoulders slumped. The alpha vanished, leaving just a tired man. Fine, he whispered. I'll take you home.
Chapter 20. The Jacket Pocket. He dropped me off at the dorm. He tried to walk me to the door, but I slammed the car door in his face and ran inside. I locked the door. I locked the deadbolt. I put a chair under the handle. Tasha was gone for the weekend. I was alone. I paced the room, my heart racing. Werewolves, alphas, mates. It was insanity. I needed to call my dad. No, I couldn't call Dad. He'd probably try to hunt Richard down with a wrench. I was shivering. I was still wearing the red dress, but I was freezing. I realized I was still wearing Richard's tuxedo jacket. He had draped it over my shoulders in the car when I started shaking. I pulled it off, throwing it onto the couch. It smelled like him. Rain, spice, and that underlying scent of wild forest. It made my heart ache, which made me angry. How can I miss a monster? I went to pick up the jacket to throw it in the trash, but something crinkled in the inside pocket. I paused. Curiosity, the cat killer, took over. I reached into the silk pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a letter, on heavy university letterhead. I unfolded it. To Richard Blackwood, CEO, Blackwood Enterprises. From Dean Miller, Department of Fine Arts. Dear Mr. Blackwood, we gratefully accept your donation of $50,000 to the art department. Per your specific instructions, the necessary funds have been allocated to cover the mandatory registration and licensing fees for Anna Miller's senior installation, ensuring her eligibility despite the budget freeze. The remainder will be used for general upgrades. As requested, your identity as the angel donor will remain strictly anonymous. I read it twice. The date was the day before the angel donor was announced. My hands started to shake, but not from cold this time, from rage. He hadn't just helped me move scrap metal. He hadn't just encouraged me. He had bought me. He had paid for my spot in the showcase. He had paid for the miracle that saved my degree. The whole time I was stressing, crying, working my hands to the bone, he had just written a check to make the problem go away, like I was a charity case, like I was a pet he needed to keep happy. I looked at the crumpled letter. Sloan was right, I whispered to the empty room. I am the charity case.
Chapter 21. The Breakup. I didn't call him. I didn't text him. I waited until Monday morning. I walked into the art studio. Richard was there, of course. He was standing by my installation, inspecting a weld. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept since the gala. When he saw me, his face lit up. Anna, I didn't think you'd come today. We need to talk about Saturday. I walked up to him and slapped the piece of paper against his chest. He caught it before it fell. He looked at it. He paled. Anna, he started, his voice steady but cautious. I can explain. Explain what? I demanded, my voice cracking. That you own me? That you bought my way into the showcase because you felt sorry for the broke girl? I didn't do it because I felt sorry for you, he said urgently, stepping closer. I did it because you were going to lose your dream over a clerical error. I have the means to fix it. Why wouldn't I? Because I didn't ask you to, I shouted. The room went silent. Other students turned to look. I didn't care. You lied to me, Richard. You pretended to be a student. You pretended the scrap metal was a coincidence. And you pretended that I earned this spot. Tears pricked my eyes. Do you know what this makes me feel like? It makes me feel like my art isn't good enough, like I only got in because my boyfriend wrote a check. "Your art is incredible," he growled, his eyes flashing gold. "I didn't buy your talent, Anna. I just bought the stage so the world could see it." "It doesn't matter." I wiped a tear away angrily. "You manipulated my life. You treated me like a problem to be solved with money. That's not a partnership, Richard. That's ownership." I took a breath, steeling myself. "The bet. Remember the bet? 1 month to prove you're the man I need." Richard went very still. "Anna, don't." "You lost," I said. "You're not the man I need. You're a king who thinks he can control everything, and I don't want to be controlled." I pointed to the door. Get out of my studio, get out of my life, and take your money with you." Richard looked at me. He looked at the pain in my eyes. He could have argued. He could have used his alpha voice to make me listen. He could have refused to leave, but he didn't. He slowly folded the letter and put it in his pocket. He looked at my installation one last time, the twisted metal structure he had helped build. "He promised," he said, his voice hollow. "If I lost, I'd walk away." He looked at me, and for a second I saw the wolf inside him howling in agony. "Goodbye, Anna." He turned and walked out of the studio. He didn't look back. And as the door closed, I realized that winning the bet felt a hell of a lot like losing everything.
Chapter 22. The Drunken Mistake. 3 days post-breakup, and I was a cliché. I was wearing sweatpants I hadn't washed in a week, eating dry cereal out of the box, and listening to sad indie playlists that consisted entirely of acoustic guitars and people whispering about rain. Tasha walked into the living room, took one look at me, and sighed. "Okay, that's it," she announced. "You've been moping since Monday. You smell like depression and Lucky Charms. We are drinking." "I don't want to drink," I mumbled. "I want to wallow in my tragic backstory." "Nope, I bought tequila, the cheap stuff that tastes like gasoline and bad decisions. Drink." 2 hours later, I was sitting on the floor, holding a shot glass, feeling fuzzy and dangerously emotional. "He lied to me, Tosh," I slurred. "He bought my degree. He thinks I'm a charity case." "He thinks you're hot," Tasha corrected, pouring herself another shot. "And he's rich. Do you know how hard it is to find a rich guy who is also obsessed with you? It's like finding a unicorn with abs." "He's a wolf," I corrected, "a literal wolf. He growls. It's a whole thing." "Even better, free heater in the winter." I looked at my phone. It was sitting on the coffee table, mocking me. I picked it up. "Don't do it," Tasha warned. "I'm just checking the time." I was not checking the time. My thumb hovered over his contact name. I had changed it from Richard to the Big Bad Wallet. I hit call. It rang once. "Anna?" His voice was sharp, alert. It was 2 a.m., but he sounded wide awake. "You," I said, pointing a finger at the phone, "you are a jerk." There was a pause. "Are you drunk, Anna?" "I am enhanced," I declared, "and I called to tell you that I hate you. You're arrogant, you're bossy, and you smell like rain, which is unfair because I love rain." "Where are you?" Richard asked. I heard the sound of keys jingling in the background. "Are you safe?" "I'm in my dorm, with Tasha and tequila." I hiccuped. "Why did you leave? I told you to leave and you actually left. You're supposed to fight for me. That's what they do in the movies." "You told me to go," he said softly, his voice thick with pain. "I promised I wouldn't force my presence on you." "Well, your promise is stupid," I whispered, tears suddenly leaking out of my eyes, "because now I have no one to wash my paintbrushes, and I miss your stupid vase." Silence stretched on the line. "I'm outside," he said. I scrambled to the window. Down on the street, 4-story below, the black Mercedes was idling. He was leaning against the hood, looking up at my window. "You're stalking me again," I sniffled. "I never stopped guarding you," he admitted. "I've been parked here every night since Monday. Go to sleep, Anna.
I'm not going anywhere. I stared down at him. Even from this distance, I could feel his gaze. Good night, wolf boy. Good night, little one.
Chapter 23. The Proof. The next morning, my head felt like it was being used as a drum set by a heavy metal band. I dragged myself out of bed at 10 a.m. to the sound of pounding on the door. "Go away, Richard," I croaked. "I'm not decent, and I'm possibly dying." I opened the door, ready to yell. It wasn't just Richard. Richard was there, looking impeccable in a gray suit, holding a large coffee. But standing next to him, looking terrified, was Dean Miller, the head of the art department. "Miss Miller," the dean squeaked. "Good morning." I blinked, pulling my bathrobe tighter. Dean Miller? Richard? What is happening? Richard stepped forward. He didn't try to touch me, but he handed me the coffee. "Drink," he said gently. "You sound dehydrated." "I drunk dialed you," I remembered, mortified. "You did. It was very informative, but that's not why I'm here." He turned to the dean. "Tell her." Dean Miller cleared his throat, sweating profusely under Richard's glare. "Miss Miller," the dean started. "Mr. Blackwood forcefully suggested I clarify the nature of his donation." "I know about the donation," I said bitterly. "He paid for my spot." "Well, yes," the dean said, "but the selection committee had already chosen your project as the top entry before we lost the funding." I froze. "What?" "Your installation, Urban Decay, was ranked #1 by the faculty panel 3 months ago. When the budget was cut, we were going to have to cancel the entire showcase. Everyone was going to lose out. Mr. Blackwood didn't just pay for you, he funded the whole event to save the department. But he specifically asked that your fees be covered so you wouldn't know." I looked at Richard. He was watching me closely, his expression guarded. "You were already #1, Anna," Richard said quietly. "I didn't buy your talent, I just made sure the lights stayed on so you could show it off." I looked back at the dean. "So, I earned it?" "Unquestionably," the dean said. "You're the most talented student we've had in a decade." Richard looked at the dean. "Thank you, Dean Miller. You may go. Try not to lose the budget again." The dean fled down the hallway. I stood there, holding the coffee. The anger that had been fueling me for days began to drain away, leaving just shame. "You saved the whole class?" I asked. "I don't care about the class," Richard said bluntly. "I care about you. But I knew you'd feel guilty if you were the only one who got to present." "I called you a jerk," I whispered. "You also said you missed my face," he reminded me, a small smirk touching his lips. "Is that still true?" I looked at him, really looked at him. He hadn't slept. I could see the tension around his eyes. He'd been parking outside my dorm to make sure I was safe, even after I broke his heart. "Maybe," I admitted, "but you still lied." "I omitted," he corrected, "and I'm sorry. I won't do it again." He took a step back, respecting the boundary I'd set. "I'll see you at the showcase, Anna. I'll be in the back row." Chapter 24. The Command. I didn't make it to the showcase just yet. Later that afternoon, I was walking across the campus quad to the studio when I heard shouting. A crowd had gathered near the fountain, and where there was a crowd, there was usually trouble. I pushed my way through. In the center of the quad, Richard was standing. His jacket was off, thrown on the grass. His shirt sleeves were rolled up. Facing him was a guy I didn't recognize, a massive, hulking brute with a shaved head and tattoos covering his neck. "You've gone soft, Blackwood. You let a human female leash you? You're embarrassing the bloodline." Richard didn't yell back, but the sound coming from his chest was terrifying. It was that deep subwoofer growl amplified by 10. Grrr. His eyes were fully amber. His hands were curled into claws. He looked feral. He looked like the monster I had seen in the ballroom. The brute lunged. Richard moved faster than sight. He caught the guy's fist, twisted it, and slammed him into the concrete rim of the fountain. Crack! The crowd screamed. Richard didn't stop. He raised his fist, ready to deliver a blow that would definitely kill the guy.
"Richard!" I screamed. He didn't hear me. The wolf had taken over. The stress of the breakup, the lack of sleep, the insult, it had snapped his control. He roared, a sound that made the birds fly out of the trees. He pulled his arm back for the killing strike. I didn't think. I ran into the circle. "Richard!" I yelled, running right up to him. The crowd gasped. The brute looked terrified. Richard looked at me, his eyes wild, unrecognizable. He snarled at me. It was a warning snarl. Back off. I didn't back off. I was tired, I was hungover, and I was sick of wolf drama. I pointed my finger at the ground right next to my foot. "Sit," I yelled. It was the command I used on my neighbor's golden retriever. It was ridiculous. You don't tell an alpha king to sit. Richard froze. His fist hovered in the air. He looked at my finger pointing at the ground. He looked at my furious face. The amber in his eyes swirled, fighting with the brown. He twitched. His wolf instincts were screaming kill, but his mate instinct was screaming obey her. Slowly, agonizingly, Richard lowered his arm. He let go of the brute, who scrambled away like a frightened rat. Richard looked at me, breathing heavily. Then, to the absolute shock of 300 college students, he sat down. Right there on the edge of the fountain. He sat, put his hands on his knees, and looked up at me like a scolded puppy. The silence on the quad was deafening. "Good boy," I breathed out, my knees shaking. Richard blinked, his eyes turning back to chocolate brown. He looked around at the staring crowd, then at me. "Did you just," he rasped, wiping a splash of blood from his lip, "did you just command me to sit in front of my entire territory?" "I wasn't going to let you kill him," I said, crossing my arms to hide the fact that I was terrified. "And I don't want to date a murderer." Richard paused. He caught the word. "Date?" he repeated, hope flaring in his eyes. "I'm considering it, if you can learn to heal." Richard threw his head back and laughed, a loud, joyous sound that broke the tension completely. "For you, little one, I'll learn to roll over."
Chapter 25. The Surrender. The drive to the penthouse was silent, but it wasn't the awkward silence of a breakup. It was the heavy, electrified silence of a storm about to break. Richard drove with one hand on the wheel. His other hand was gripping mine on the center console, holding on so tight his knuckles were white, as if he was afraid I'd vaporize if he let go. We took the private elevator up. As soon as the doors slid open into the penthouse, the air changed. I didn't even make it to the living room. Richard spun me around, pinning me against the cool glass wall of the hallway. He didn't hurt me. He never hurt me, but the desperation in his movement was overwhelming. "You came back," he rasped, his forehead resting against mine. His breathing was ragged. "You stood between me and a feral alpha. You could have been killed. I couldn't let you do that, not for me. Everything is for you, Anna. My sanity, my control, it's all yours, Anna. You proved that today. You told a king to sit, and my knees hit the ground before I even processed the command." He pulled back slightly to look at me. His eyes were a swirling mix of chocolate and gold, raw with emotion. "I am terrified of how much power you have over me," he admitted. "Good," I said, feeling a surge of bravery. "Because I'm scared too. I'm scared of your world. I'm scared of the claws and the politics and the money, but," I took a deep breath, "but I'm more scared of being without you. I tried it for 3 days. It sucked." Richard let out a choked sound, half laugh, half sob. He buried his face in the crook of my neck, inhaling my scent deeply. "I love you," he murmured against my skin. "I love your stubbornness. I love your art. I love that you gave me a fake number for a septic tank cleaner. You are my mate, Anna, in every way that matters." "I love you, too," I whispered. That was it. The dam broke. He kissed me. It wasn't gentle. It was acclaiming, a desperate, starving collision. He kissed me like I was the only oxygen in the room. I wrapped my legs around his waist, and he lifted me effortlessly, carrying me down the hall to the bedroom without breaking the kiss. He laid me on the massive bed like I was made of glass, but I pulled him down with me. "No more running," I said, running my hair through his hair. "Never," he promised.
The rest of the night was a blur of heat and skin and whispers. For a man who could bend steel pipes, he touched me with a reverence that made my heart ache. He worshipped every inch of me, making me forget about the budget cuts, the gala, and the crazy wolf politics. In the dark, with his arms wrapped around me like a shield, I finally understood what he meant by mate. It wasn't just biology, it was belonging.
Chapter 26. The Morning After. I woke up to the smell of burning toast. I stretched, reaching for the warm body that should have been next to me but found empty sheets. I sat up, wearing one of Richard's dress shirts that came down to my knees. I padded out to the kitchen. The scene that greeted me was domestic chaos. Richard Blackwood, the billionaire alpha king, was standing in the kitchen wearing nothing but gray sweatpants. He was glaring at a toaster. Smoke was rising from the slots. "You're fighting a toaster?" I noted, leaning against the doorframe, and losing. Richard spun around. He looked wild, hair messy, a smudge of flour on his chest for some reason. When he saw me wearing his shirt, his expression softened instantly. "It's defective," he accused the appliance. "I tried to make you breakfast, the machine rebelled." "You burned the toast," I laughed, walking over. I applied too much heat. I popped the toast up. It was charcoal. "Richard, you don't use alpha heat on bread. You just push the button." He pulled me into his arms, resting his chin on top of my head. "I'm better at hunting breakfast than cooking it. I could go catch a deer." "Please don't. I prefer bagels." We stood there for a moment, swaying in the morning sun. It was perfect. Normal. "So," he said, his voice rumbling against my back, "I have a meeting with the council at noon, but I thought maybe I could drive you to campus first. In the Mercedes?" He sounded hopeful. He really wanted to show off. I pulled back, grinning. "Actually, I have a better idea. You're always in control, right? You drive the fast cars, you lead the pack." "Yes," he said warily. "I want to drive." Richard paled. "You want to drive the S-Class? It has 600 horsepower, Anna." "I drive a 2010 Honda Civic with a dented bumper. I can handle it." "My car is not a Civic. It's a precision instrument." "Are you scared?" I teased. "The big bad wolf is scared of my driving?" Richard narrowed his eyes. "Get the keys." 20 minutes later, we were on the highway. Richard was in the passenger seat, gripping the oh crap handle above the door with white knuckles. "Brake," he instructed tensely. "Brake early. It has ceramic brakes. They bite." "I know how to drive, Richard," I laughed, accelerating. The engine roared. It was exhilarating. "You're tailgating," he noted. "That's a cement truck. If a rock hits the windshield—" "Relax. Turn on the radio. Find some Taylor Swift." He groaned. "Not the breakup songs, please. My heart can't take it." "Fine. Lover album it is." I glanced over at him. He was terrified of my driving, yes, but he was also looking at me with a goofy, love-struck grin. He reached over and placed his hand on my thigh, his thumb rubbing soothing circles. "You're a menace," he said affectionately. "I'm your mate," I corrected. "God help me," he sighed, but he didn't move his hand. Chapter 27. The Luna Trials. The happiness bubble popped the moment we walked into the pack house, which doubled as his corporate headquarters. We were holding hands. I was still wearing my jeans and a hoodie, looking like a student. Richard was back in a suit, looking like a king. We walked into the main boardroom. I expected an empty room. Instead, 12 elderly people were sitting around the mahogany table. They wore expensive clothes and expressions that looked like they had been sucking on lemons for 50 years. The council. "Richard," a woman with severe gray hair barked, "you're late, and you brought the human. Her name is Anna, and she is my mate. She goes where I go." He pulled out a chair for me at the head of the table. I sat, trying to look regal while wearing Converse sneakers. "This is unacceptable," an old man hissed. "She commanded you on the quad yesterday, in public. A human commanding an alpha? It makes the pack look weak. It makes the pack look controlled, Richard countered coldly. She stopped me from killing a pack member. She showed mercy. That is strength. She is a liability. The gray-haired woman slammed her hand on the table. She doesn't know our laws. She doesn't know our history. She cannot be Luna Queen just because you decided to sleep with her. I stood up. "Excuse me," I said. My voice shook a little, but I projected it like I did during class presentations. The room went silent. They all glared at me. "I didn't ask to be your queen. I just wanted to date Richard. But if being with him means dealing with this," I gestured to their sour faces, "then I'm not going to be a liability. I'm a quick learner." "Learning is not enough," the old man sneered. "By ancient law, a non-wolf mate must prove their worthiness to the pack. They must undergo the Luna trials." Richard growled. "No, the trials are archaic. They are designed to kill humans. I forbid it." "You cannot forbid the law, Alpha," the woman said smugly. "Unless she passes the 3 trials, wit, endurance, and spirit, she cannot be recognized. And if she is not recognized, the bond must be severed." "Severed?" I asked. "Rejection," Richard whispered, horror in his voice. "They would force us to reject each other. It would kill me." I looked at Richard. I looked at the council. They wanted me to fail. They expected the little art student to run away crying. I thought about the warehouse. I thought about the sit command. I thought about how Richard looked when he washed my paintbrushes. I looked the gray-haired woman in the eye. "What are the trials?" I asked. "Anna, no." Richard grabbed my arm. "It's dangerous. They'll put you in the forest. They'll hunt you." I put my hand on his. "You said I was tough, right? You said I was terrifying." I turned back to the council. "I accept. I'll do your stupid trials. And when I win, you're all going to owe me a very big apology and a budget increase for the art department." The council looked stunned. Richard looked like he wanted to vomit. "First trial begins tomorrow at dawn," the woman said, a cruel smile spreading on her face. "Bring comfortable shoes, human. You're going to need them." Chapter 28, Trial 1, The Puzzle of the Moon. The first trial took place in the castle archives, a dusty, stone-walled room that smelled like old paper and wolf's breath. The council sat on a raised dais. Richard stood off to the side, his arms crossed, looking like he was 1 second away from murdering everyone in the room. He wasn't allowed to help me. If he spoke, I was disqualified. Elder Thomas, the grumpy old man from yesterday, gestured to a pedestal in the center of the room. On it sat a heavy, intricate silver box covered in ancient runes. "The trial of wit," Thomas intoned. "Inside this box lies the token of the first Luna. The box is sealed by the ancients. A true Luna knows the history of her people. You have 1 hour to open it. If you force it, the mechanism will crush the token, and you fail." I walked up to the box. It was beautiful, clearly handcrafted centuries ago. The wolves watched me, expecting me to panic. I leaned in. The carvings weren't random. They were narrative reliefs. I recognized the style. It was similar to 12th century Gothic storytelling. "It's a linear narrative," I muttered to myself. I looked at the carvings. One side showed a wolf howling at a full moon, another showed a wolf bowing to a sun, the third showed a wolf sleeping in a cave. I circled the pedestal. Most wolves probably tried to solve this by sniffing out a hidden latch or using their sensitive hearing to pick the lock. But this wasn't a lock, it was art. "The myth of the twin skies," I said aloud. I looked at Richard. He remained stone-faced, but his eyes flickered. In art history, symbolism is everything. The wolf doesn't bow to the sun. Werewolves are moon creatures. That panel was the lie. I pressed my thumb against the sun. Nothing happened. I looked closer. The wolf in the sleeping panel wasn't sleeping. Its eyes were open, staring at a small flower carved in the corner. Lilac, or wolfsbane.
it's not about strength, it's about what kills you. The council looked bored. They checked their watches. I remembered something Richard had said in the library about history books being wrong. It wasn't the weather, it was the supply lines. Details matter. I ignored the wolves and the moons. I looked for the anomaly. On the lid, in a field of stars, one star was actually a tiny indented button shaped like a tear. The morning star. In Werewolf lore, which I'd speed read on Wikipedia last night, the first Luna died of grief. I didn't push the star, I pulled it. Click. The mechanism groaned, the silver panels slid back seamlessly, revealing a hollow interior. Inside sat a simple jade ring. I picked it up. Done, I said, turning to the council. 7 minutes. Do I get extra credit for speed? The room was dead silent. Elder Thomas's jaw dropped. She opened it, a council member whispered. Alpha Kale took 3 hours to smash a replica. Richard let out a breath he'd been holding. He winked at me, a tiny, microscopic wink. Beginner's luck, Thomas scoffed, recovering his composure. Do not get arrogant, human. The archives are safe. The forest is not.
Chapter 29, Trial 2, The Canvas of the Forest. The second trial was endurance, which was a fancy way of saying run for your life. I stood at the edge of the Blackwood Preserve, miles of dense, terrifying forest. I was wearing cargo pants, hiking boots, and a backpack I had packed myself. The rules are simple, Elder Thomas announced. You must reach the northern flag, 3 miles away. You have a 30-minute head start. Then 3 hunters will be released to track you. If they catch you before you reach the flag, you fail. He smiled cruelly. Hunters enjoy the chase. Try not to scream. Richard stood by the monitors. He looked pale. He mouthed the words, "Run fast." I nodded. The air horn blew. I ran. But I didn't just run. I knew I couldn't outrun a wolf. I had asthma and short legs. I had to outsmart them. I ran for 10 minutes until I hit a dense thicket of pine. I stopped and dropped my bag. I pulled out my secret weapon, turpentine. I had 3 bottles of high-grade industrial paint thinner. To a human, it smells strong. To a wolf with a nose 100 times more sensitive than a human, it smells like chemical warfare. I splashed the turpentine on the base of the trees in a wide circle. Then I pulled out a can of neon orange spray paint. I sprayed a massive arrow on a tree pointing left. Then I bolted right. I scrambled up a rocky embankment, using the terrain to hide my footprints. I pulled out a bag of cayenne pepper, thanks Auntie Mo's kitchen, and dusted my trail behind me. 20 minutes later, I was hiding in a tree, literally sitting on a branch 12 feet up, when the hunters arrived below. They were in wolf form, huge gray beasts. They hit the turpentine zone and instantly started sneezing. One of them whined, rubbing his nose on the dirt. The chemical sting blinded their sense of smell. Then they saw the orange arrow. Wolves are smart, but they are also conditioned to follow signs. 2 of them ran left, following my fake arrow. The third one, the biggest one, stayed behind. He sniffed the cayenne pepper trail I'd left as a decoy. He took a deep breath. Achoo! The wolf sneezed so hard his head hit the dirt. He shook his head, disoriented, and ran off in the wrong direction, wheezing. Up in the tree, I stifled a giggle. I waited until they were gone, climbed down, and jogged casually toward the north. Back in the command center, Richard was watching the drone feed. He watched the hunters sneezing and running in circles while his human mate walked calmly through the woods. He started laughing. He laughed so hard he had to lean on the table. She's painting the forest. She's literally blinding them with art supplies. Chapter 30, The Sabotage. I was a mile from the flag. I was tired, sweaty, and covered in pine needles, but I was winning. The path ahead narrowed, crossing a deep ravine via an old wooden suspension bridge. Once I crossed that, it was a straight shot to the finish line. I stepped onto the bridge. It swayed ominously. Almost there, I panted. I was halfway across when a figure stepped out from the trees on the other side. It wasn't a hunter, it was Sloane. She wasn't in wolf form, she was in human form, wearing expensive tactical gear, looking furious. "You're cheating," she yelled across the ravine. "It's called strategy, Sloane. Read a book," I yelled back. "You're making a mockery of our traditions," she spat. "Turpentine? Pepper? You're a joke." "The joke is that I'm winning," I said, taking another step. Sloane pulled a knife, a serrated hunting knife. She looked at the ropes holding the bridge up. "Sloane, don't," I said, freezing. "If you cut that, I fall 50 feet onto jagged rocks. That's murder. Richard will kill you." "Richard won't know," she smiled, her eyes flashing yellow. "He's watching the drone feed of the decoy path. The signal glitched over this ravine. No one is watching, Anna, just us." She slashed the left cable. Snap. The bridge lurched violently. I screamed, grabbing the handrail as the wood tilted sideways. "Oops," Sloane mocked. "Looks like the human couldn't handle the terrain." She raised the knife to cut the second rope. "Wait," I screamed. "If you drop me, you failed the pack. A Luna protects the weak." "I am the Luna," she shrieked. "Me, not a human with a paint bucket." She brought the knife down on the second rope. Snap. The bridge gave way. I fell. The wind rushed past my ears. I saw the rocks rushing up to meet me. I squeezed my eyes shut, waiting for the impact. But I didn't hit the rocks. Something massive, warm and furry collided with me in mid-air. Huge jaws clamped gently around the back of my backpack. The momentum shifted. We slammed into the side of the cliff wall, sliding down through dirt and vines, slowing the fall just enough. We hit the ravine floor with a bone-jarring thud. I groaned, rolling over. Standing over me was a wolf, but not just any wolf. This wolf was midnight black, massive, a creature of pure muscle and rage, with eyes that burned like molten gold. Richard. He had broken the rules. He had left the command center, sprinted a mile in seconds, and jumped off a cliff to catch me. He stood over my body, hackles raised, vibrating with a growl so deep it cracked the stones beneath his paws. He looked up at the cliff edge where Sloane was standing. Sloane went pale. She dropped the knife. Richard roared, a sound of pure, unadulterated execution. He wasn't playing the game anymore. The trial was over. The war had begun. Chapter 31. The Beast and the Breath. The dust settled in the ravine. My back throbbed where I'd hit the ground, but I was alive. I looked up. The massive black wolf standing over me was vibrating with rage. His snarl was a terrifying, continuous sound, directed up at the cliff edge where Sloane had disappeared. He crouched, muscles bunching in his hind legs. He was going to jump. He was going to scale that cliff, hunch Sloane down, and tear her apart in front of the drone cameras. If he did that, he'd lose the council. He'd be branded a tyrant who killed a high-ranking female. "Richard!" I gasped, grabbing a handful of his thick black fur. The wolf snapped his head down to look at me. His eyes were wild, spinning with gold and red. He didn't recognize me for a split second. He looked like a monster. I didn't flinch. I reached up and pressed my palm flat against his sweat snout. "Hey," I whispered, my voice shaking but firm. "Look at me. I'm okay. You caught me. I'm okay." The wolf froze. He blinked, the red fading slowly from his irises, leaving only the deep, molten gold. He whined, a high, frantic sound that broke my heart, and nudged his massive head against my chest, sniffing frantically to check for broken bones. "I'm fine," I promised, burying my face in his neck. He smelled like ozone and pine and terror. "Shift back, Richard. I need you to have thumbs so you can help me up." A shimmer of heat passed through the air, bones cracked and reshaped. In seconds, the wolf was gone, and Richard was crouching over me. He was naked, standard werewolf physics apparently, but he didn't care. He ripped a branch off a bush to cover himself slightly, his eyes never leaving my face. "She cut the rope," he snarled, his voice a jagged ruin. "I saw it. She tried to kill you." "I know," I said, wincing as I sat up, "and we will deal with her, legally. You are a king, Richard, not a murderer. Do not let her turn you into a monster." He stared at me, his chest heaving. "You fell. And you caught me. You broke the rules of the trial." "To hell with the trial," he spat. "I'm burning the council to the ground." "No," I said, grabbing his hand, "because if you burn it down, they win. They prove I made you weak. We're going back up there, and I'm going to finish this. I'm going to beat them at their own game." Richard looked at me with awe. He kissed my forehead hard. "You are insane. I love you." "I know. Now help me up. My butt hurts." Chapter 32. The Final Stand. Trial 3. We walked back into the arena, the starting line, looking like survivors of a war. I was covered in dirt and scratches. Richard had hastily put on a pair of spare gym shorts someone handed him. The council was in an uproar. Sloane was there, looking pale and feigning innocence. "He helped her," Elder Thomas shouted, pointing a bony finger. "The Alpha interfered. Immediate disqualification." "She cut the bridge," Richard roared, stepping forward. The entire clearing went silent at the power of his voice. "I have the drone footage. Attempted murder of a Luna candidate is punishable by death." Sloane trembled. It was an accident. The rope was old." "Enough," I yelled. I limped forward to the center of the clearing. "You want to talk about rules? Fine. Technically, Richard helped me, so technically I didn't finish the endurance trial." "Exactly," Thomas sneered. "You fail." "However," I continued, raising my chin, "Pack law states that if a candidate is interrupted by acts of God or treachery, they may demand the third trial immediately to settle the score. Double or nothing." The crowd murmured. It was an obscure rule, but valid. "The third trial is spirit," Thomas warned. "It is the most dangerous. You must face a feral wolf, a wolf who has lost its human mind to bloodlust, and survive in the ring for 5 minutes. You have no weapons, no paint thinner, no Richard." Richard stepped up beside me. "No, I won't let you." I looked at him. "Trust me." I turned to Thomas. "Bring out the puppy." They cleared the circle. A heavy iron cage was wheeled out. Inside, a gray wolf was throwing itself against the bars, foaming at the mouth, snarling with a madness that chilled the blood. The gate opened. The feral wolf shot out. It saw the crowd, panicked, and then locked eyes on the only thing standing in the center. Me. It charged. The crowd screamed. Richard tensed, ready to jump in again. I didn't run. I didn't flinch. I didn't even raise my hands. I stood perfectly still. I remembered the painting in the archives. The wolf wasn't sleeping. It was in pain. This wolf wasn't evil. It was terrified. It was confused. When the wolf was 5 feet away, ready to leap for my throat, I dropped my gaze. I tilted my head to the side, exposing my neck. It was the ultimate sign of submission, but combined with the alpha scent I carried from Richard, it was confusing. The wolf skidded to a halt, confused by the lack of fear. It growled, snapping its jaws inches from my face. Spittle hit my cheek. "Sit," I whispered. The wolf blinked. "You're a good boy," I said softly, my voice level and calm. "I know you're scared. I know it hurts, but you're a good boy." I slowly extended my hand, not to strike, but to touch. The crowd held its breath. If I was wrong, I lost a hand. The feral wolf sniffed my palm. It smelled Richard on me, power. It smelled the lilac, calm. It smelled the turpentine, chaos. The madness in its eyes cleared for a split second. It whined. Then slowly, the massive beast lowered its hindquarters. It sat. I reached out and scratched it behind the ear. "See?" I said to the silent, stunned council. "He just needed a little positive reinforcement. You guys really need to work on your dog training." Chapter 33. The Poisoned Chalice. The celebration that night was legendary. The council had no choice. I had passed. I was officially recognized as the Alpha's mate and the future Luna. Sloane had been stripped of her rank and dragged off to the dungeons, pending a trial because I insisted on due process. The banquet hall was filled with music, food, and wolves who were suddenly very eager to be my best friend. I was wearing a new dress, blue this time, like the night sky. Richard hadn't let go of my hand for 3 hours. "You were incredible today," he murmured, leaning over to kiss my shoulder. "When you exposed your neck to that feral, my heart stopped beating." "I knew he wouldn't bite," I said, grabbing a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. "He just needed empathy. Wolves are emotional creatures. Look at you." "I am very emotional," he agreed, clinking his glass against mine. "To us, to the art department, and to Pete's Septic Service." I laughed. "To Pete." I took a long sip of the champagne. It tasted sweet, a little too sweet, like almonds. I swallowed. "So," Richard said, turning me toward him, "now that we've conquered the council, what's next? A honeymoon? Paris? Rome?" "Rome," I started to say. "I want to see the—" The words died in my throat. The room suddenly tilted violently. The colors of the banquet hall smeared together like wet paint. My knees felt like water. "Anna?" Richard's voice sounded far away, like he was underwater. I dropped my glass. It shattered on the stone floor. "Rich!" I tried to say his name, but my tongue felt heavy, numb. My legs gave out. I didn't hit the floor. Richard caught me. "Anna!" He was shouting now. The music stopped. "Cold," I whispered. "So cold." A sharp, stabbing pain erupted in my stomach. I convulsed in his arms. "She's been poisoned," Richard roared, his voice shaking the chandeliers. "Seal the doors. No one leaves." I looked up at him. His face was a mask of pure terror. I'd never seen him scared before. Not of the council, not of the rogue, not of the feral wolf, but he was terrified now. "It's okay," I tried to say, but darkness was rushing in at the edges of my vision. The last thing I saw was Richard's golden eyes filling with tears, and the last thing I heard was the most heartbreaking howl I had ever imagined. Then the world went black. Chapter 34. The Awakening. Waking up felt like swimming through molasses, thick, heavy, and exhausting. The first thing I registered was the smell. It wasn't the smell of champagne or banquets. It was the sharp, stinging scent of antiseptic, layered over something else: rain, spice, and distress. "Richard." I peeled my eyes open. The light was blinding. I groaned, shielding my eyes with a hand that felt like it weighed 50 pounds. "Anna?" The voice was ragged, broken. My vision cleared. I was in a hospital room, but not a normal one. The walls were mahogany and the sheets were silk. A private pack clinic. Richard was sitting in a chair next to the bed. He looked wrecked. He was still wearing his suit trousers from the banquet, but they were wrinkled. His shirt was unbuttoned, his hair was a mess, and he had stubble on his jaw that suggested he hadn't shaved in days. His eyes were red-rimmed. "Hey," I croaked. My throat felt like sandpaper. Richard let out a sound that was half sob, half laugh. He lunged forward, not to hug me, but to bury his face in the mattress beside my hip. He gripped my hand so hard I thought he might crush it, but I didn't pull away. "You're back," he whispered into the sheets. "You're back." "How long?" I whispered. He looked up. The agony in his eyes made my chest ache. 3 days. The poison, it was wolfsbane mixed with cyanide, a cocktail meant to kill a shifter. For a human, it should have been instant. "I'm tough," I managed a weak smile. "I eat cafeteria food." Richard didn't smile. He brought my hand to his lips, kissing my knuckles repeatedly. "My blood," he explained. "Because we are mated, my blood heals you, but the bond was almost severed. I couldn't feel you, Anna. For 3 days, I couldn't feel you." He looked at me with such raw vulnerability that I wanted to cry. The big bad Alpha King was trembling. "Who did it?" I asked, my voice hardening. Richard's expression shifted instantly. The vulnerability vanished, replaced by a cold, terrifying rage. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "We found him," Richard said. "He is in the cells. I was waiting for you to wake up so you could give the order." "The order?" "The order of execution."
Chapter 35. Justice. They wheeled me down to the holding cells in a wheelchair. I protested, claiming I could walk, but Richard looked ready to carry me in his teeth if I argued, so I sat down. The cells were in the basement of the pack house, damp, cold, and smelling of fear. In the center cell, stripped of his fine robes and looking very small, sat Elder Thomas, the man who had mocked me during the trials. He looked up when we approached. He didn't look sorry. He looked hateful. "She lives," Thomas spat. "A pity. The human weed is resilient." Richard growled. He reached for the bars, the steel groaning under his grip. "One word, Anna. Say the word, and I will rip his throat out." I looked at Thomas. "Why?" "Because you are pollution," Thomas yelled, standing up. "You weaken the bloodline. An Alpha King cannot be tethered to a fragile human who paints pictures. We need strength. We need a wolf queen." "I survived your box," I said calmly. "I survived your forest. I survived your feral wolf. And I survived your poison. Seems like I'm pretty strong, Thomas." "You are a trickster." "I'm adaptable," I corrected. I looked at Richard. He was vibrating with the need to kill. The guards were watching. The pack was watching. They expected blood. That was the wolf way. "Richard," I said softly. "Yes, little one?" "Open the cell." Richard hesitated, then unlocked the door. He stood right next to me, ready to pounce. I wheeled myself closer to Thomas. "Killing you would be easy," I said, "and frankly, you deserve it. But if Richard kills you, he becomes the tyrant you claim he is, and if I order your death, I become the monster you think I am." Thomas narrowed his eyes. "So, you show mercy, weakness." "Not mercy," I said coldly. "Punishment." I turned to Richard. "I want him banished." The room gasped. Banishment was often considered worse than death. A lone wolf, stripped of pack magic, stripped of family, wandering the human world alone. "Banishment?" Richard asked. "Yes, strip him of his rank, strip him of his assets, dump him in the middle of, let's say, New Jersey, with no money and no ID." I smiled at Thomas. "Let's see how the superior wolf survives in the human world without his pack to protect him. You can get a job, Thomas, maybe at a gas station. You'll learn to appreciate humans when you're begging them for a paycheck." Thomas went pale. The arrogance drained out of him. "Kill me," he begged. "Do not cast me out." "No," I said, turning my wheelchair around. "You wanted to separate humans and wolves. Now you get to live as one. Good luck with the rent prices." Richard stared at me. Then a slow, dark grin spread across his face. "New Jersey," he mused. "Cruel. I like it." He signaled the guards. "Take him away."
Chapter 36. The Taco Incident. 2 weeks later, life had returned to a strange version of normal. I was moved into the penthouse permanently, mostly because Richard refused to let me out of his sight, but I was back in classes. One Tuesday evening, we were sitting on the couch. Richard was reading quarterly reports. I was sketching. Suddenly, a wave of nausea hit me. I dropped my sketchbook and bolted for the bathroom. I barely made it to the toilet before I was violently sick. Before I could even flush, Richard was there. He had moved so fast he'd knocked over a lamp. "Anna!" He dropped to his knees beside me, panic wild in his eyes. He grabbed my shoulders, sniffing the air frantically. "I don't smell wolfsbane, but you're sick. Did they use something odorless? Is it a new toxin? I'm calling the guards. I'm locking down the building." He pulled out his phone, his thumb hovering over the emergency button.
Richard, stop, I groaned, leaning my head against the cool porcelain. It's not poison. You're vomiting. That's a symptom. It's the shrimp tacos from that truck on 4th Street. I knew the shrimp tasted funny. I gambled and I lost. Richard paused. He sniffed me again, deep and searching. Shrimp? Are you sure? It's not cyanide masking as cilantro. I'm pretty sure cyanide doesn't taste like regret. It's food poisoning, you big drama queen. He slumped against the bathtub, letting out a long exhale. Thank God. Just bad shrimp. I can deal with bad shrimp. I was about to declare war on the culinary industry. He reached over and flushed the toilet for me, then wet a washcloth and wiped my face. You know, he said, his voice turning strangely soft, morning sickness also looks like this. I froze. I looked at him. He was trying to look casual, but his tail, if he had one in human form, would be wagging. Richard, I said warningly, we used protection. Wolf genetics are potent, he pointed out smugly, and we have been very active since the hospital. I am not pregnant with a litter of puppies, Richard. I ate a bad crustacean. Do not start knitting booties. I'm just saying, an heir would be nice. A little alpha running around, biting furniture. If I have a kid, it's going to be an artist. It will paint on the walls, not bite them. I can live with that, he grinned, kissing my forehead. Go brush your teeth. You smell like cilantro and death. I hate you. I love you too. I'll go get the ginger ale. He walked out and I heard him whistling. I leaned back against the wall, touching my stomach. Not yet, I thought, but maybe someday. And the terrifying part was the idea didn't make me want to run away. It made me want to stay.
Chapter 37. The Art of Intimidation. The night of the senior showcase finally arrived. The warehouse, once a dusty pile of scrap metal, had been transformed. The industrial lighting Richard installed made my sculpture, The Weight of Silence, look haunting and magnificent. But the most terrifying part wasn't the art, it was the guests. Richard, I hissed, hiding behind a pillar, why is the entire front row filled with men who look like bouncers for the mafia? Richard adjusted his cufflinks. He was wearing a velvet tuxedo jacket that made him look like a vampire prince. That is the Pack Council, the new council. I told them attendance was mandatory. They're scaring the liberal arts students, Richard. Look at Donovan. He's growling at a watercolor painting of a duck. He's critiquing it, Richard said defensively. He thinks the brushwork is derivative. I sighed, smoothing down my dress. Just tell them to smile, please. The gallery opened. The pack roamed the room in a tight formation, drinking wine like it was water and staring intensely at the art. But surprisingly, they were buying. I saw 3 lethal-looking enforcers arguing over who got to buy a ceramic vase. Then he walked in. Julian Robert, the city's most notorious art critic, a man who could end a career with a single tweet. He wore a scarf indoors and looked like he smelled something bad. He stopped in front of my installation. He stared at it for a long time. Richard and I stood nearby, holding our breath. Pedestrian, Julian announced loudly. He turned to his assistant. It's trite. Industrial decay, how original. It lacks soul. It lacks suffering. It looks like it was welded by a child. I felt Richard stiffen beside me. A low rumble started in his chest. Grrr. Julian looked around confused. Is there a generator running? Richard, no, I whispered, grabbing his hand. Let me handle this. I stepped out from behind the pillar. Mr. Robert, I said, smiling brightly, I'm so glad you stopped by. I was actually hoping for your feedback. Julian looked down his nose at me. And you are? The artist. And I think you missed the point of the piece. It's not about decay. It's about resilience. It's about taking something broken and making it stand tall again. I took a step closer. Kind of like your career after that libel lawsuit last year. The crowd gasped. Julian turned red. Excuse me? He sputtered.
I read the trades, I shrugged, and honestly, calling my work trite is rich coming from a man who gave a glowing review to a blank canvas last month. Maybe you're the one who lacks soul, Julian. Or maybe you just need glasses. Julian opened his mouth to retort, but he stopped. Richard stepped up behind me. He didn't growl, he didn't shout. He just placed a heavy hand on my shoulder and stared at Julian with his golden alpha eyes. My partner asked you a question. Do you need glasses? Julian looked at Richard. He looked at the dangerous men in suits lining the walls who had all stopped talking to watch. Perhaps I was hasty. The welding is actually quite robust. Good evening. He practically ran out of the warehouse. Richard looked down at me, beaming. That was incredibly hot. I learned from the best, I winked. Now go buy me a drink. I think I just saved my career.
Chapter 38. The Loose End. The after-party was at our penthouse. Tasha was teaching the pack enforcers how to do the cha-cha slide, which was a surreal nightmare I would cherish forever. I was in the kitchen, eating a celebratory cupcake, when Richard's phone rang. He frowned at the screen. Unknown number. He answered it on speaker. Blackwood. Yeah, is this the guy who keeps sending me fruit baskets? Because I'm allergic to kiwi, pal. My eyes widened. I knew that gruff, irritated voice. Pete? I whispered. Who's that? Pete asked. Is that the girl who gave me the fake number? Listen, lady, your boyfriend is weird. Who sends pears? Nobody eats pears. Richard leaned into the phone, looking oddly guilty. Hello, Pete. I apologize for the kiwi. I was trying to show gratitude. Gratitude? For what? My voicemail box is full of your messages thanking me for facilitating destiny. You sound like a cult leader. I stifled a laugh. Richard looked offended. Listen, Rick, or whatever your name is, Pete continued, his voice dropping, sounding stressed. I'm calling because, well, you seem to have money. The fruit baskets were from Harry and David. That's the expensive stuff. I have resources, Richard confirmed. Is there a problem? Yeah, big problem. I'm in a jam. My shop, the building owner is selling. He's kicking me out tomorrow. I got 3 trucks and 1,000 gallons of, well, you know, and nowhere to go. I need a loan. I'll pay you back with interest or free septic service for life. Richard looked at me. To Richard, Pete wasn't just a stranger. Pete was the sacred keeper of the fake number, the catalyst. If I hadn't called Pete, Richard wouldn't have tracked my scent. In a twisted werewolf logic, Pete was family. Where are you, Pete? Richard asked. I'm at the shop. The landlord is here now with some, big friends. They're trying to tow my trucks. Richard's eyes darkened. Big friends? Yeah. Look, if you can't help, it's fine. I just didn't know who else to call. Don't move, Richard commanded. We are coming. He hung up. We? I asked. He is the godfather of our relationship, Anna, Richard said, deadpan, grabbing his car keys. And no one evicts the godfather.
Chapter 39. The Business Meeting. We pulled up to Pete's Septic Service 20 minutes later. It was a grimy garage in the industrial district. There were 3 large men standing by a tow truck, arguing with a short, balding man in greasy coveralls. That had to be Pete. Richard parked the Mercedes. He stepped out, adjusting his suit jacket, and I followed, still in my gala dress but wearing sneakers. Stay behind me, he murmured. We walked up to the group. Hey, Pete yelled when he saw us. You actually came, and you brought... Wow, you're overdressed for a septic yard. The 3 large men turned around. They looked like budget movie villains. Leather jackets, chains, the works. Who's this? The lead thug asked, sneering at Richard. The accountant? Richard looked at the thug. He didn't blink. He didn't posture. He just stood there, radiating that terrifying calm that usually preceded violence. I am an investor, Richard said smoothly, and I understand there is a dispute regarding the lease. No dispute, the thug said, stepping into Richard's personal space. We're taking the property, and the trucks cover the back rent. Get lost, pretty boy, before you scuff your shoes. The thug poked Richard in the chest. Mistake. Richard looked at the finger on his chest. Then he looked at me. Anna, he asked politely, am I allowed to break his finger? Just one? No breaking, I sighed. Use your words, Richard, or your wallet. Richard sighed, disappointed. He looked back at the thug. I am buying the building, Richard stated. The thug laughed. It's not for sale to you. Everything is for sale. Richard pulled out a checkbook. It was a black checkbook. How much is the debt? And the building? 200 grand, cash, tonight. Richard wrote a check. He tore it out and held it up. 300, Richard said, for the building, the land, and for you to leave immediately and never return. If you return, he leaned in. His eyes flashed gold for a split second. A low, subsonic growl vibrated the air, shaking the tools on the nearby workbench. If you returned, I won't ask my girlfriend for permission to break things. The thug looked at the check. Then he looked at Richard's eyes. The primal fear kicked in. The lizard brain recognized a predator. The thug snatched the check. Sold. They scrambled into their tow truck and peeled out of the lot. Silence fell over the garage. Pete stared at Richard, then at the retreating thugs, then at Richard again. Who are you guys? Pete whispered. Are you the mafia? Waste management consultants, I said, grinning at Richard. Richard turned to Pete. The building is yours, Pete. Consider it a gift. A gift? Why? Richard wrapped an arm around my waist, pulling me close. Because, Richard said solemnly, when she gave me your number, you didn't hang up. You picked up the phone, and that made all the difference. Pete looked at us like we were insane. You rich people are weird. Do you want a free tank flush or not? We'll take a rain check, I laughed. Come on, Richard, let's go home. You have paintbrushes to wash. Chapter 40. The Masterpiece. Graduation came and went in a blur of caps, gowns, and Richard cheering so loud he nearly got escorted out by security. But the real event was what happened 2 weeks later. Richard told me to meet him at the university studio. One last look before they clear it out, he had said. When I walked in, the studio was empty. My installation was gone, shipped off to a gallery downtown. The room smelled of turpentine and dust, a smell I used to associate with stress, but now associated with him. Richard was standing in the center of the room. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing jeans and a t-shirt that was covered in paint? Richard, I asked, dropping my bag, what happened? Did you fight a rainbow? He turned around. He looked nervous. Actually nervous. The Alpha King who stared down feral wolves was fidgeting with a paintbrush. I made art, he announced grimly. He stepped aside to reveal a canvas on the easel behind him. I walked closer. It was abstract. Very abstract. It looked like a red and blue explosion, but in the center, written in shaky, dripping black letters, were the words, "Be my queen. P.S. I promise not to buy your grades ever again." I stared at it. I laughed, then I choked up, then I laughed again. It's terrible, I whispered, tears filling my eyes. The composition is all wrong. I know, Richard said, stepping up behind me. I have many talents. Painting is not one of them, but I wanted to ask you in your language. He dropped to one knee. The floor was dirty, covered in old paint splatters, but he didn't care. He pulled a ring box from his pocket. Inside sat a diamond that was less of a rock and more of a small planet. It was set in rose gold, twisted to look like vines. Anna, he said, his voice thick with emotion, you taught me that strength isn't about claws or commands. It's about mercy. It's about patience. You are the only person who has ever made me want to sit. I giggled through my tears. I love you, he said. I love your dad. I tolerate your roommate. I even bought a building for Pete. I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of you. Marry me? I looked at the bad painting. I looked at the man on his knees. Yes, I whispered. Yes, you big, furry idiot. Yes. He slid the ring on my finger. He stood up and kissed me, and for a moment, Everything was perfect. We were invincible. Chapter 41. The Black Envelope. We decided to have a small engagement party at the penthouse. Just Tasha, the pack inner circle, and my dad, who drove up in his truck. The party was going great. Tasha was teaching Donovan, the beta, how to use a Snapchat filter, and Richard was refilling drinks. My dad, Arthur, was standing by the window, looking out at the city lights. He looked older tonight, frailer. He hadn't touched his beer. "Dad?" I walked over, touching his arm. "Are you okay? Is the view too much? I know heights make you dizzy." He turned to look at me. His eyes were red, but not from alcohol. He looked like a man carrying the weight of the world. "Anna," he said quietly, "we need to talk, in private." My stomach dropped. "Okay, let's go to the library." We walked into Richard's study and closed the door. The party noise faded to a dull thrum. Dad reached into his jacket pocket. He didn't pull out a gift, he pulled out a thick, black envelope. It looked old, worn at the edges. "I didn't want to ruin this for you," he said, his voice trembling. "I tried to be happy for you. I really did. Richard seems like a good man, but—" He took a shaky breath. "I've been looking for answers for 12 years, Anna, ever since the night your mother died." "Mom died in a car accident, Dad, a drunk driver." "That's what the police report said, because the police couldn't explain what really happened. But I found the unredacted files. I found the witness statements." He handed me the envelope. "It wasn't a car accident, Anna, and it wasn't rebels or random gang violence like the news told us. It was a raid, a territory war between two packs. Your mother was driving through the crossfire of a supernatural dispute we weren't even supposed to know existed." I took the envelope. My hands were numb. I opened it. Photos, grainy, horrible photos of a shredded sedan, and a report from a private investigator detailing the true combatants. Aggressor, the Silver Moon Pack. Alpha in command, King Edward Blackwood. "The Silver Moon Pack," my dad said, tears streaming down his face. "His pack, his father led the raid that killed her. They left her there, Anna. They left her in the wreckage." I stared at the paper. The logo of the pack, the howling wolf, was stamped on the report. "Richard didn't know," I whispered. "He was a kid then." "He is the king now," Dad said brokenly. "He wears the crown of the man who murdered my wife. His fortune, his power, it's built on blood, her blood." He looked at me, begging. "How can you marry him, baby? How can you marry into the family that took her from us?" I felt like I was floating outside my body. The joy of the proposal, the ring on my finger, it all felt like a sick joke now. The door opened. Richard walked in holding 2 glasses of champagne. He was smiling. "There you two are," he said. "Tasha is threatening to make a speech, and I think we need to intervene before she—" He froze. He took in my pale face, my dad's tears, and the black envelope trembling in my hand. Richard set the glasses down on the desk. He scanned the first page. He frowned. He flipped to the second. His face went gray. All the color drained out of him. He stared up at my father, then at me. This is from 12 years ago," Richard said, his voice hollow. "The border wars." "Read the casualty list," my father spat, stepping forward. "Read the name of the civilian casualty in the blue sedan." Richard looked down. Elena Miller. He closed his eyes. He swayed slightly, gripping the edge of the desk for support. "My father," Richard whispered. "He led that raid. I remember he came home with blood on his tires. He said it was a necessary purge. I was just a boy, Anna. I wasn't alpha yet. I didn't question him." He looked at me, horror dawning in his eyes. "I didn't know," he choked out. "Anna, I swear on my life I didn't know it was your mother. I didn't know. But it was your pack.
I said, my voice dead. It was your father. The legacy you fight so hard to protect, it killed her. Richard looked at the ring on my finger. It looked heavy now, like a shackle. He didn't try to defend himself. He didn't try to explain the complexities of wolf politics. He looked at my father's grief and my shock, and he accepted the blame. He slowly took a step back. I am a monster, he whispered, his voice breaking. I am the son of a murderer. I brought you into the house of the people who destroyed your family. He looked at me and the light in his golden eyes died out. I cannot ask you to stay. I cannot ask you to love me. Not now, not ever. Richard, I started, but I didn't know what to say. The pain was too big. It filled the room, suffocating us. Take your father, Richard said, turning away so I wouldn't see the tears falling down his face. Take him and go, please, before I lose the will to let you leave. I looked at his back. I looked at my dad. I made the only choice I could. I grabbed my dad's arm. Come on, Dad, I whispered. We walked out of the library, past the party, and out the door. I left the ring on the table.
Chapter 43. The Choice. We stayed at a cheap motel on the edge of town, the kind of place where the carpet is sticky and the neon sign buzzes like an angry hornet. My dad, Arthur, sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall. The black envelope was on the nightstand between us, like a loaded gun. I'm going to the press, Dad said, his voice raspy. I'm going to expose them. People need to know there are monsters living in the high-rises. They need to know who killed Elena. I sat in the armchair, knees pulled to my chest. I felt hollow. The phantom weight of the ring was gone from my finger, but the ache in my chest was unbearable. If you expose them, I whispered, they will fight back. It will be a war, Dad, and you'll lose. I don't care, he said, his eyes burning with 12 years of grief. I want him to hurt. I want his family to burn like mine did. I looked at my dad. I loved him. He was the only family I had left. But I looked at his face, twisted with hate, and I realized something terrifying. Hate hadn't fixed him. It had just frozen him in time. I thought about Richard. I thought about the man who washed my paintbrushes, the man who sat on a fountain in front of his entire pack because I asked him to. The man who just hours ago had let me walk away without a fight because he thought he didn't deserve to be loved. His father was a killer, but Richard was a protector. He isn't his father, I said softly. Dad looked up. He is one of them. He's the one who saved my degree, I argued, standing up. He's the one who bought Pete's building so he wouldn't go bankrupt. He's the one who let us leave tonight, Dad. If he was a monster, we wouldn't have made it out of that penthouse alive. I walked over to the nightstand and picked up the envelope. Mom died because of a war, because of hate between two sides. If we do this, if we try to destroy him, we're just starting another war, and I won't be a casualty like Mom. Anna, Dad pleaded, how can you go back to him? Because I love him, I said, the truth ringing clear in the dingy room. And because he hates what happened to Mom just as much as we do. I saw it in his eyes. I grabbed my car keys. I'm going back, I stated. I'm going to break the cycle. You can come with me, or you can stay here and hate him, but I'm choosing my future, not the past. Dad stared at me. For a long minute, the silence was deafening. Then slowly, he stood up. He looked tired, but the fire of vengeance had dimmed, replaced by the resignation of a father who just wanted his daughter to be safe. You're just like her, he whispered, stubborn as a mule. He grabbed his coat. I'm driving. Your car makes a weird noise when you turn left.
Chapter 44. The Bow. We walked back into the penthouse at 3 a.m. The party was long over, the guests were gone, the room was dark, lit only by the city lights drifting in through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Richard was sitting on the floor in the center of the room. He was still wearing his suit, but he had loosened his tie. He was holding the engagement ring, staring at it. When the elevator doors opened, his head snapped up. He saw me. Then he saw my father standing behind me. Disbelief washed over his face. He scrambled to his feet, looking unsure, almost afraid. "Anna," he breathed, "you came back. Did you forget something?" "Yeah," I said, walking toward him. "I forgot to tell you that you're an idiot." I stopped in front of him. "Your father was a bad man, Richard. He did terrible things, but I'm not marrying your father. I'm marrying you." Richard looked at me, his eyes wide. "But the blood, the history." "History is for textbooks," I said firmly. "I care about the present." I turned to my dad. Arthur stepped forward. He looked small next to the Alpha King, but he held his ground. "I loved her," Arthur said, his voice cracking. "She was my whole world." Richard didn't argue. He didn't offer money. He didn't make excuses. Instead, Richard Blackwood, the Alpha King of the Silver Moon Pack, did the unthinkable. He dropped to his knees, not to propose this time, but to submit. He lowered his head, exposing the back of his neck, the most vulnerable spot on a wolf, to my human father. "I cannot bring her back, Arthur. I cannot change the sins of my bloodline. But I swear to you, Arthur, I will spend every day of my existence making sure Anna is safe. I will stand between her and any darkness. I offer you my life as payment for the debt my family owes yours." The room was silent. This was a king bowing to a commoner. It was a surrender of absolute power. My dad stared at the powerful man kneeling before him. He looked at Richard's exposed neck. He saw the humility. He saw the love. Dad sighed, a long, heavy exhale that seemed to let go of 12 years of anger. "Stand up, son. You're wrinkling your suit." Richard looked up, stunned. "I don't want your life," Dad said. "I just want you to take care of my little girl. And maybe explain why you lied about the waste management job. I really liked thinking you were a plumber." Richard stood up slowly. A tentative, hopeful smile broke through his grief. "I can learn about plumbing," Richard promised. "I'm a quick study." Dad grunted, patting Richard awkwardly on the shoulder. "We'll start with PVC piping next Sunday. Don't be late." I picked up the ring from where Richard had dropped it. "You dropped this," I said. Richard took it. His hands were shaking as he slid it back onto my finger. "Never taking it off again," he swore. "Good," I kissed him. "Now, order pizza, we have a wedding to plan, and I refuse to do it on an empty stomach." Chapter 45. Epilogue. 1 year later. The rusty tap hadn't changed much in a year. The floors were still sticky, and the music was still too loud. But we had changed. I sat at the bar, nursing a cranberry juice. Richard was in the back, playing pool with my dad and Pete. Yes, Pete. They were a trio now, the king, the dad, and the plumber. And presiding over the game was Auntie Maureen. She was sitting on a high stool like a queen on a throne, wearing a massive, sparkly fascinator hat inside a dive bar. She was currently holding up her iPad, showing our wedding photos to a terrifying-looking biker who was too polite to run away. "Look at the train on that dress," I heard her shouting over the music. "Silk, imported. My niece married a king. What does your nephew do? Does he own a castle? No? Pity." I spun my wedding ring on my finger, smiling as I watched Richard lose a game on purpose just to make my dad cheer. "Excuse me." I turned. Standing next to me was a man. He was incredibly pale, wearing a velvet coat that looked like it was from the 1800s, and he had an air of brooding mystery. Vampire. Definitely a vampire. "I couldn't help but notice you sitting alone," the vampire said, his voice smooth as silk. "You have a very vibrant pulse. May I buy you a drink?" I smiled. "I'm married, happily." "Marriage is fleeting," the vampire smirked, leaning closer. "Eternity is forever. Perhaps I could have your number, just in case you tire of mortality." I sighed. Some things never changed. I grabbed a cocktail napkin. I scribbled a number down. "Here," I said, sliding it to him. The vampire took it, kissed my hand, and winked. "Until we meet again, my dear."
He glided away looking triumphant. A moment later, Richard walked up, wrapping his arms around me from behind. He rested his chin on my shoulder, nuzzling my neck. "I saw that," he murmured, his voice rumbling with amusement. "Another conquest?" I said, "Just a vampire looking for a snack." Richard watched the vampire leave the bar, clutching the napkin like a prize. "Did you give him Pete's contact info?" Richard asked, grinning. I laughed, leaning back into his embrace. "No," I said. "I gave him Dad's number." Richard choked on a laugh. "Arthur? You gave a vampire your dad's number?" Dad's been complaining that he has no one to talk to about 19th century history, and that vampire looked like he lived through it. They can discuss the Civil War for hours. It's a match made in heaven. Suddenly, Auntie Maureen bustled over, waving a fan. "Anna," she hissed, eyeing the door where the vampire had just exited. "Who was that pale man? He looked very aristocratic. Does he have a brother? Your cousin Elena is tired of the dentist. The dentist has no mystery." Richard kissed my cheek, shaking his head as he suppressed a laugh. "You are dangerous, Anna Blackwood, and so is your aunt." "I know," I said, leaning into my husband, my king, and the love of my life. "That's why you adore us."